are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized. The police in our community occupy our area, our community, as a foreign troop occupies territory. And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us because they have their orders to do so. And just as the soldiers in Vietnam have their orders to destroy the Vietnamese people, the police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property because we own no property. They couldn't possibly be there to see that we receive the due process of law for the simple reason that the police themselves deny us the due process of law. And so it's very apparent that the police only in our community are not for our security, but the security of the business owners in the community, and also to see that the status quo is kept intact.
Why y'all gonna murder me and not even say, I'm sorry? Y'all murder niggas. Y'all murder niggas like it was a thing to do. And y'all can't even apologize. Y'all apologize if you run over somebody's cat. Y'all apologize if you can't pay a rent on time. Y'all apologize if you haven't raised taxes. But when you just start flat on murdering niggas that are asleep, y'all can't even say, I'm sorry.
To log in. Oh,
let's
there they
go.
are.
Yeah, let's go. Let's continue. Let's continue.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue. Go.
We can see you. And now we can hear you too. All right.
Let's have
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone.
10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
So we have about 10 minutes because of that whole technical thing. So we can.
So we'll be brief.
And say all the things you need to say, though.
Right. Hi, I'm Nikos. We decided that I go first. I have a sleeping child as well, so there is a second reason for that. We are here today after Mark's invitation to talk about the very grim situation that is ongoing in Exarchia for a long time. I heard the latter part of Athena's, speech or position, contribution, and I think this she made very clear why Athens is so important for the international social movement today, and why Exarchia, as the core of the social movements in Greece that are under this severe attack, is also so important. And we see that when gentrifiers came, when constructors came, when market forces, the state, when they failed to deal with this neighborhood, with our neighborhood. What did they do? They brought on board the construction of a public work in the central, in the only square of Exarchia and of this wider area, as an extra tool of the capital, as an extra tool of state imposition, in order to change the character of this neighborhood. Because this neighborhood is quite close to developments, it's quite close to decision-making centers. It's a very important stronghold of the anarchist movement, a very important stronghold of social movements in general, as Athina said before. And it had to be taken down. And the metro station plays a key role in that. Because along with the COVID, the change of government in 2019, then the COVID, the pandemic, when we were in lockdown and there were no possibility to let's say to resist, and at the same time be sensitive towards other social groups that were under threat due to the pandemic. So what happened was that in 2020, in August, in the mid of the summer, in the middle of summer vacations, the state, along with an army of, I don't know, hundreds, probably policemen and other kind of security forces, they barged into Exarchia Square and pushing people away, spraying on people, beating up people, in order to the people who reacted to the construction of the metro station. We had mobilized in advance, and this gave us the opportunity to have. We had the assembly created about 8 months before the August attack. And this gave us the opportunity to have some resistances, to be able to react to the attack of the police. However, in the middle of the summer, it was quite difficult to stop and block. At the same time, I don't really know if at this point in the developments in Exarchia and in Athens, with all these forces of gentrification, of the market forces that we are all under pressure by, we could react to an army of 100 plus policemen with full gear, with tear gas, with guns, and so on. However, from the first day that the construction site was set up in Exarchia, we had a big demonstration with, I think, everyone who is interested in this neighborhood and was in Athens at the time joined. And however, at the same time, the reaction by the police was disproportional. There were beatings, there were tear gas dropping, and at the same time, operationally, it was a very tough terrain to work with. Because the construction site, I guess we will have a chance to show it to you later on, because we happen to be right on the square. Construction site is made of metal sheets, of concrete, of very long metal fences. So operationally, it is extremely difficult to deal with that. The second stage, hoping that you can still hear me. The second stage that we could identify, thanks, Mark. The second stage that we can identify is months later, and while the reactions were ongoing by us, by the community, by the neighborhood, by people who felt solidarity towards the cause of our assembly, was the cutting down of 72 trees from the square. Those 72 trees were some of them planted decades ago. They were somehow a part of our daily life, part of our community. And for us, it was extremely violent, especially in the context of the current climate crisis, in the context of the wildfires that are destructive in Greece and in Athens and Attica in particular. Again, the reaction was the same. The operational plan was the same. The citizens reacted. The people of the neighborhood mobilized. The police reacted disproportionately. All of us are singled out. Possibly our devices are surveilled. It's very difficult to organize. I understand that coming from the US, you can relate to that, but at the same time, here the quality and the level of democracy and checks and balances that are put by institutions, so they are simply non-existent. The third part of that I would like to point out was a few months ago when the initial construction site was extended. The extension of the construction site gives absolutely no breathing ground to anyone in the community. You cannot, you cannot walk the street. You are under threat every time you try to go through the square because cars are passing by. And what happened a few days ago, that is the last point that I'm going to bring up, is a judicial decision. Mm-hmm. A judicial decision coming from the Court of First Instance in Athens that vindicated actually the community and 113 citizens that went to the Court of First Instance, claiming that the construction site, as it stands right now, it's not secure. There is no possibility for fire brigade vehicles or ambulances to come by and do their job anyway. And on that grounds, they decided that it should be legal. The extension is illegal and it needs to be taken back. However, the Greek state and the construction company has not done this yet. And from what we understand, they don't plan to do it. And from what we understand, what we need to do is to take radical measures within the law this time, which means that we could take away the construction site or the extension of the construction site ourselves, use the infrastructure, use services of representatives of the judiciary, and we can do that legally. There is one point blocking us, and at that point, this is money, because these are expensive services. These are specialized services, and while we are legally, on the right side, we are legally okay anyway to proceed with this process. We cannot afford it at the moment. So this is a good context to point this out, that the struggle for exarchia is not a struggle for exarchia. It's a struggle for the social movement in Greece, the social movement internationally. Yes, and sorry for that.
We know you have a very little time. I would just like to show you how it is right now. We're actually in our house, and I'm just gonna bring you back. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so this is the street, and it has space for just one car. It goes until there. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, we can. Yes.
And until there. So the space behind, it's like 1.20 meters.
Unbelievable.
I don't know if you could see it well.
Yes, it was very clear. It was very clear.
So we know you don't have time, but thank you for listening to us.
So
No, thank you.
can I ask a quick question? And so is there a way, can I give people a link or something, a way if people want to donate to help out the cause or anything like that from the website, or what should I do?
We can accept, I think at the moment, we can only accept donations in cash through representatives. Okay. But we could also, you can find us on Facebook and our other media that probably will make available later on. there we could arrange a way to be supported. But also we are not legally, of course, we're not legally established. It is a community initiative coming right from the grassroots without any intervention of any institutional means or a bank.
Okay.
This is the way we need to play.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this amazing, amazing fight and amazing actions and everything. All your work. Thank you so much. From New York. Thank you, guys. Oh, everybody here. Look. Everybody.
Wow.
Cara, we want to see Cara. Where is she?
Aqui, cara.
Hey!
Ah!
Miss you guys.
Miss you, love you.
Love you.
Yeah.
We miss you, Kara. Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
starting again? Putting the table in the front so people could hear what
Yeah, but I speak really, I think, I don't know. Let's try, because we're super late now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but next one.
All right.
Yeah.
No worries.
Thanks everybody who came, and thank you for
Thank you.
to Pitt
Hosting.
for hosting. And sorry about the technical
Okay. Let's put everybody here. Now is the workshop with FAISCA and in Brazil, and we do like a simultaneous translation. We speak slow, each one have a time. I really asked Felipe, hi Felipe, to help us in translation, because the person that's supposed to do translation is sick, and we are here as volunteer. We don't find nobody else, and then we need to do this job. And then let's start with Felipe. Thank you so much for being here from Brazil, FAISCA Publications. We really love you here in New York. We read your books. We love you guys. And I'm really thank you everybody that's here we start this conversation. Thank you. Your voice, Felipe.
Okay, thank you very much. Listen, Black, I would like to put a presentation. Can I put a presentation here for everybody to see?
Of course. You share the image with Guilherme.
Okay. I'll try to do this now. Let's see.
I think it's just about share the screen, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to send the presentation, and maybe
No,
in 1
it's better
second.
share your screen. It's better you share your screen.
Oh,
Melhor
yeah?
você dividir a tela, melhor você dividir a tela.
E faz como?
Compartilhar. Tem um botãozinho que você vê embaixo que está escrito compartilhar a tela, e você compartilha.
Porque, ó, para mim tem aqui a câmera, o microfone aí, configurações. É nesse aqui, será?
Eu acho que é.
Não, do lado de configurações tem um que aparece apresentar. Não está aparecendo no seu, não?
Então, tá. Ah, tá bom. E aí dá para compartilhar a tela.
Isso. Aí você tem a opção de subir uma coisa do Google Drive ou de compartilhar a tela.
Deixa eu dar uma olhada aqui. Acho que agora vai.
E eu acho que o Lourenço entrou também com a gente, você está vendo?
Vocês estão enxergando a apresentação ou não?
Tá agora, tá aqui, estamos enxergando. Tá aqui com a gente, estamos aqui enxergando sim.
Muito bom. Então, eu vou fazer, Black, eu vou fazer o seguinte, eu vou fazer em inglês, o Gabriel faz em português e a gente traduz, e daí a gente vê como que a Thay prefere fazer.
Tá bom.
Tá bom?
Como você quiser.
Então, eu vou fazer... Beleza. So, thank you very much.
Fala alto, Felipe.
Okay, can you hear me?
Guys, everybody can hear Felipe? Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, my name is Felipe Correia. I'm a Brazilian editor, researcher, teacher, founding member of FAISCA Publicações Libertárias, coordinator of the Institute for Anarchist Theory and History, and member of the Libertarian Socialist Organization. So I would like to thank you, everybody, the organizers of the New York Anarchist Book Fair, and all the comrades participating of this activity, okay? Today, all the projects we will discuss here are projects related and carried out by OSL and its members, our organization. I will talk about FAISCA, comrades Gabriel and Thaisa, also members of our organization. We'll talk about some of our works, okay? FAISCA is an independent anarchist publishing house from Brazil, self-managed, and we have an editorial collective that manages the publishing house. It's also a self-financed project funded in 2004, and this year of 2024 celebrating its 20th anniversary. We have over 60 titles published in this 20 years, and our publishing house is part of a political project to develop what we call organized anarchism in Brazil. We're part of a tradition here in Latin America called Specificista, and it's very close to the platformist tradition that we also reivindicate here in our organization. Okay. A brief history of FAISCA. FAISCA is a published house that started in a very artisanal way. The first books in 2004 were stapled photocopies. So the first idea was exactly to publish these booklets and maybe even books about anarchism, but mainly from a contemporary perspective. These are the two first titles of our publishing house, Self-Management Today and Toward a New Anarchism. And then in the year after the foundation of the publishing house, we began to publish books produced in printing presses with a higher quality. These two books are about the free fair movement in the south of Brazil and a revolt, a very important revolt that occurred in the city of Florianópolis, okay, the state of Santa Catarina. After the publishing house started to publish other titles, and in the next few years, we've published some other titles, including these ones. Okay, the first one about the Russian Revolution, written by an important Brazilian author, Mauricio Trachtenberg, and also this second book written by Rudolf de Jong. It's an important book on anarchist theory and strategy. And this third photo is our first DVD, is a documentary of an interesting struggle in Spain. Okay. The publishing house also created a pocket collection with which gradually included several titles, including these ones on the Mexican Revolution, discussing and contesting Hobsbawm's ideas on anarchism, discussing syndicalism and social movements, libertarian education, and also organization and strategy. Another important feature of our publishing house is the partnerships that we're doing throughout the years with other anarchist publishers. Since 2004, we started this project, this collective projects, like this one with some other independent publishers, and Imaginário is a traditional anarchist publisher of Brazil, to edit the most complete compilation of Chomsky's articles on anarchism in the world, and this compilation inspired other editions throughout the world. Yeah. After that, we start to publish with other anarchist presses, anarchist publishers like Imaginário, I told that, and Axiamé, and we kind of discovered the importance of classic anarchists and classical anarchism. As you see here, the first book, it's a collection of essays of Mikhail Bakunin. The second one is a text discussing Bakunin's contribution to syndicalism. And the third one, it's a biography of Ricardo Flores Magón, written by Santillán. Our publishing house also developed close ties and partnerships with anarchist organizations. The most important one in this first period was with the Anarchist Federation of Rio de Janeiro, FARJ, and we published a book on contemporary anarchism, O Anarquismo Hoje, another on social anarchism written by Frank Mintz. But our main partnership was in the publication of this book, Social Anarchism and Organization, that is already translated into English and a lot of other languages. Okay. FAISCA also published different titles discussing this anarchist conception of specificismo and platformism. Like this first one, it's a long interview with Juan Carlos Mechoso, a very important militant of the Uruguayan Anarchist Federation. And this interview is already translated into English. A second book on anarchism, social movements, and popular power, written by me. A third one on the problems and possibilities of anarchism, written by José Antonio Gutiérrez, and a translation called Black and Red, and discussing race and syndicalism and anarchism in Africa. It's a small book by Lucien van der Walt. We also published discussions on anarchist history and theory. The first one is a very important book on the anarchist revolution that was promoted in Manchuria from 1932, written by the Argentinian comrade Emilio Crisi. It's also a very important book that is being translated into other languages, published in French, now in Spanish and other languages. And the second one, it's a book I've written on the theory of the state theory, the theory of state, written by Bakunin over its main writings. Okay. There is also another partnership with a publishing house called Entre Mares. It's a kind of a libertarian socialist anarchist publisher. And together with them, we published the traditional history of the Machinovist movement written by Arshinov, the anarchism written by Fernandez, and also the Commune of Kronstadt written by Ida Matt. We also published some articles addressing issues of race, ethnicity, and gender, such as Compañeras. It's kind of female comrades, the title, discussing the history and contributions of anarchist women in Sao Paulo from the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, and also a translation of the Zabalaza Anarchist Communist Front discussion how to fight racism. These are just some examples, okay? And after that, most recently, some years ago, we started to publish an academic collection in partnership with the Institute for Anarchist Theory and History, because we would like to have influence, not just among militancy. So this is a purpose that we're advancing throughout the years, but we would like also to influence the academic discussion. So we started this collection with some books, discussion, for example, the contributions of the very important anarchist Abraham Guillen, another book discussing the importance of the anarchist organizations in Brazil in the middle of the 20th century, my book on Bakunin called Freedom or Death. It's now published by Black Rose Books. And finally, a partnership that we've established with our organization, Libertarian Socialist Organization. It's a new organization that was founded last year, and with different state anarchist organizations or anarchist organization that was organized throughout the different states in Brazil, and we formed a whole organization, and we edited the manifesto, the principles, and now a whole collection of 10 books in partnership with OSL. Okay, it's important to say that FAISCA, it's not part of OSL, but everybody in the editor collective in FAISCA is member of OSL, the Libertarian Socialist Organization. So we are very close. We have a partnership, but also some autonomy, some independence regarding one another. Okay. So now I will talk about some concrete stuff, like how we select titles, a bit of our daily work, how we do to make our project being developed, and so on. So first thing, the titles, we have normally two possibilities. First one, and the most common, the editorial collective suggests title or titles, and then we just plan how to edit the book and to publish the book. And second possibility, we receive proposals, and then we evaluate it collectively, the editorial collective, and then decide if we will or will not publish the book. Okay. Our daily work basically is about and planning publications, carrying out part of the editorial work and forwarding and managing part of the editorial work, because we do part of this work concerning revision, concerning covers, concerning layouts, concerning production and everything. But we also have some comrades that work as volunteers, and in some cases like to print the books. Normally in Brazil we need some services providers, so our comrades are working with this basic functions and also articulating with volunteers and service providers. And after that, we work on promotion, on consignments and sales. In general, we're working with small print runs and reprints. It's a new research that soon arrived some years ago in Brazil, that we can print 100, 300 books, and the costs are not so high. So we prefer to print it few by few, that in a way that it does not compromise cash flow or large inventory spaces and so on. So that's what we're concerning financing. Initially, we received contributions from the members of the editorial collective, some people close to the editorial collective. And then we got the researches for the first printings. And then as soon as the books were ready, we just sell these books, and then with the resources, we reinvest the money, because from the beginning, the publisher has operated as a militant and volunteer project, so people of FAISCA does not receive or does not live with the money of the publishing house, in a way that everything that the publisher earns is reinvested, so we can print other books and to do other projects and so on. And like an anarchist publishing house, FAISCA does not receive funds from private institutions, state, political parties, and so on. And today, our sales are mainly made through two channels: our website, editorafaisca.net, and also consignments with our organization Nuclei, and also some anarchist related organizations. We are having a very difficult situation with bookstores here in Brazil. We've had a lot of problems with consignments, payments, and so on. So now we choose really some few bookstores to sell our books, because they are having a lot of problems, and these problems are being transferred for our little publisher. And just to end it, I would like to talk about the relationship between our editorial project and also our political project, or the importance of building ties between the publishing house and a concrete political project. I mean, FAISCA is not just a publishing house, a small collective. FAISCA is part of a broader anarchist political project tied to Brazilian specificista, platformist anarchism, and as I said, is not part of OSL, but it's a partner, a strategic partner. We intend that books is a way to spread ideas, to make propaganda, but also and mainly to reinforce this anarchist political project that we consider the anarchist organizational dualism, anarchist mass strategy that for us is revolutionary syndicalism, and so on. So our idea is that our publishing house can educate militants, activists, close people, popular movements, unions, social movements, and so on, and to contribute anarchist groups and organizations to have their own financing projects. Or we are making available for these groups and organizations all our books with 50% of discount, so collectives can sell, can pay FAISCA after, and keep the extra money. In other cases, they can earn some money, they can buy a small quantity, sells, and rebuy again, keeping the extra money. So it's a way for groups and organizations to receive some necessary money and to keep their organization working, to pay trips, to pay physical spaces, and so on. So that's what I would like to know with you. That's what I would like to talk to you today. So we have, I would like to finish with words that we normally quote in Portuguese: lutar, criar, poder popular. So thank you very much. After, our comrades will talk to you concerning concrete struggles and movements. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you. Who want to talk now, Felipe?
Gabriel.
Gabriel is from?
Rio de Janeiro, MST.
Okay, Gabriel from Landless movement. Okay.
Ok. Boa tarde a todas e todos. Sou Gabriel, militante da OSL e do MST.
Só um minutinho, Gabriel. Você tem que falar, eu paro e a gente traduz, tá bom? Yeah,
okay.
He is Gabriel. He's from the Landless movement, and then he is here now to talk with us.
Primeiramente, gostaria de agradecer à Feira Anarquista de Nova York.
First of all, I'd like to say thanks for the New York City Anarchist Bookfair.
A questão agrária e a concentração de terras são um dos elementos estruturantes da realidade social do Brasil. Um país que possui um dos índices de concentração de terras mais altos do mundo.
Ok, agora, Felipe, você pode traduzir?
Posso. So, Gabriel is saying that the agrarian issue and land concentration are one of the structuring elements of the social reality of Brazil, which has one of the highest land concentration rates in the world.
Em 1500, com a expansão do capitalismo mercantil europeu, ocorreu a invasão portuguesa desse território.
In 1500, with the expansion of the European mercantile capitalism, the Portuguese invaded this territory.
Que massacrou mais de 300 etnias e cerca de 5 milhões de indígenas ao longo de 4 séculos de dominação.
These resulted in the massacre of more than 300 ethnic groups and around 5 million indigenous people over the course of 4 centuries.
No período colonial, foi imposto o modelo de plantation, baseado em enormes extensões de terra.
During the colonial period, the plantation model was imposed based on huge expanses of land.
Essas grandes extensões de terra produziam monoculturas de alguns produtos para exportação, utilizando o trabalho de pessoas da África escravizadas à força.
They produced monocultures of some products for export using the labor of forcibly enslaved people from Africa.
Com o nascente capitalismo industrial na Inglaterra, ocorre a falência do modelo de plantation e, em 1888, se deu o fim legal da escravidão.
With the emergence of industrial capitalism in England, the plantation model failed, and in 1888, slavery in Brazil was legally abolished.
Mas em 1850 foi decretada a Lei de Terras, que serviu para permitir a propriedade privada das terras pelos fazendeiros e impedir que os trabalhadores libertos da escravidão tivessem acesso à terra.
However, in 1850, the land law, Lei das Terras, was enacted, which served to allow private ownership of land by farmers and prevent workers freed from slavery from having access to land.
Todo esse processo histórico constituiu e estruturou o Estado brasileiro como protetor dos privilégios e interesses da classe capitalista dominante.
This entire historical process has established and structured the Brazilian state as protector of the privileges and interests of the dominant capitalist class.
E na agricultura, essa classe capitalista dominante é representada por latifundiários e fazendeiros, com a produção agrícola voltada para o mercado mundial e não para as necessidades da população.
In agriculture, it is represented by large landowners and farmers with agricultural production geared towards the global market and not the needs of the population.
A partir da década de 1990, tivemos a hegemonia do capital financeiro e das empresas transnacionais sobre a economia mundial, levando ao modelo do agronegócio.
Since 1990s, we have seen the hegemony of financial capital and the transnational corporations over the global economy, leading to the agribusiness model.
É imposto um preço de oligopólio das mercadorias agrícolas, as chamadas commodities, com um preço único mundial em dólar e controlado por empresas transnacionais.
An oligopoly price is imposed on agricultural goods, known as commodities, with a single global price in dollars and controlled by transnational corporations.
O modelo do agronegócio aprofunda o pacote da Revolução Verde no Brasil. Estima-se que, em 2022, foram utilizados 1 bilhão de litros de venenos.
The agribusiness model deepens the Green Revolution package in Brazil. It is estimated that in 2022, 1 billion liters of poison were used.
E 60% da água fornecida nas torneiras das cidades tem contaminação do agrotóxico glifosato.
And 60% of the water supplies to city taps is contaminated with the pesticide glyphosate.
Os grandes latifundiários representam 1% dos estabelecimentos agrícolas do país e ocupam 48% do território brasileiro.
Large landowners represent 1% of the country's agricultural establishment and occupy 48% of the territory.
Por outro lado, os pequenos agricultores representam 50% dos estabelecimentos, mas ocupam apenas 2,3% da área brasileira.
On the other hand, small farmers represent 50% of establishments, but occupy only 2.3% of the Brazilian area.
O modelo do agronegócio também determina a lógica de mercado dos alimentos.
The agribusiness model also determines the logic of the food market.
90% da comida consumida no Brasil passa pelos grandes supermercados, um monopólio de capitais nacionais e internacionais.
90% of the food consumed in Brazil passes through large supermarkets, a monopoly of national and international capital.
A questão ecológica está associada à questão agrária. As principais causas da crise ecológica no Brasil se devem ao modelo do agronegócio.
The ecological issue is associated with the agrarian issue. The main causes of the ecological crisis in Brazil are due to the agribusiness model.
Um modelo baseado na concentração fundiária, na produção de monocultura e no pacote da Revolução Verde.
A model based on land concentration, monoculture production, and the Green Revolution package.
O agronegócio também produz crescentes assassinatos e violência no campo, com o avanço da fronteira agrícola sobre territórios indígenas e camponeses, de forma ilegal e com o uso de grupos paramilitares.
Agribusiness also produces increasing murder and violence in the countryside, with the advance of the agricultural frontier into indigenous and peasant territories. This is illegal, and with the use of paramilitary groups.
Por terem também grande representação na Câmara dos Deputados, os latifundiários conseguem aprovar medidas a seu favor e impedir o avanço de políticas da reforma agrária.
Because they also have a large representation in the Chamber of Deputies, the landowners are able to approve measures in their favor and prevent the advancement of agrarian reform policies.
Por sua vez, o governo social-democrata de Lula, do PT, tem uma linha de conciliação de classes, sempre cedendo aos interesses do capital para conseguir governar.
In turn, the Social Democratic government of Lula, from the Workers' Party, has a line of class conciliation, always giving in to the interests of capital in order to govern.
O resultado são políticas que sempre favorecem mais o agronegócio e os latifundiários do que os pequenos agricultores e camponeses.
The result is policies that always favor agribusiness and landowners more than small farmers and peasants.
Mas existe outro modelo de produção baseado no trabalho familiar, produzindo alimentos para si, para o mercado local e nacional.
But there is another model of production based on family labor, producing food for themselves for the local and national market.
Esses são os camponeses, as famílias assentadas em projetos de reforma agrária, os camponeses pobres e sem terras.
These are the peasants, the families settled in agrarian reform projects, the poor and landless peasants.
Eles produzem uma grande variedade de alimentos em equilíbrio com os biomas, contribui na preservação do meio ambiente e na defesa dos territórios.
They produced a wide variety of foods in balance with the biomes, contribute to the preservation of the environment and to the defense of the territories.
O modelo da agricultura camponesa produz 70% dos alimentos consumidos pela população brasileira.
The peasant agriculture model produces 70% of the food consumed by the Brazilian population.
E são a base econômica de 90% dos municípios brasileiros com até 20 mil habitantes.
And they are the economic base of 90% of Brazilian municipalities with up to 20,000 inhabitants.
E foi para lutar contra essa brutal desigualdade que os movimentos sociais do campo e sindicatos rurais buscaram organizar os camponeses sem terra e os pequenos agricultores.
And it was to fight against this brutal inequality that rural social movements and rural unions sought to organize landless peasants and small farmers.
Defendendo a distribuição das terras para quem nelas vive e trabalha, e políticas públicas que garantam as condições para as famílias permanecerem vivendo na terra.
Advocating for the distribution of land to those who live and work on it, and public policies that guarantee the conditions for families to continue living on the land.
Por isso, movimentos como o MST, organizado há 40 anos, tem programas estratégicos que buscam realizar, pela pressão popular e mediação com o Estado, e também independente do Estado, no dia a dia do trabalho de base.
For this reason, movements like the MST, the Landless movement, organized 40 years ago, have strategic programs which they seek to carry out through pressure, popular pressure, and mediation with the state, and also independently of the state in the day-to-day work at the grassroots level.
Na produção, esses movimentos defendem os sistemas agroecológicos, que têm uma dimensão técnica e social.
In production, this movement defends agroecological systems which have a technical and social dimension.
Uma produção de alimentos saudáveis e que não agridem o meio ambiente, que fortalece os processos coletivos, prioriza as mulheres e novas relações sociais.
A production of healthy food that does not harm the environment, that strengthens collective process, prioritizes women and new social relationships.
Busca construir circuitos curtos de comercialização, focando nos mercados locais das pequenas cidades e com menos custos de transporte e estrutura.
It aims to build short marketing circuits focusing on local markets in small cities and with lower transportation and structure costs.
Movimentos como o MST também vão buscar organizar sua base de forma coletiva, construindo a coordenação dos assentamentos e acampamentos a partir de núcleos de base de famílias.
Movements like the MST, the Landless movement, will also seek to organize their base collectively, building the coordination of settlements and camps based on family-based groups.
Como também organizando coletivos informais para organizar a produção e a comercialização, ou associações, cooperativas e agroindústrias, como ferramentas para gerar mais renda.
As well as organizing informal collectives to organize production and distribution, or association, cooperatives, and agro-industries as tools to generate more income.
Temos clareza também que o MST e os demais movimentos da Via Campesina Brasil sofrem com muitas contradições e vícios políticos.
We are also clear that the MST, the Landless movement, and other movements of Via Campesina in Brazil suffer from many contradictions and political vices.
Assim como os riscos de serem cooptados pelo capital e pelo Estado, principalmente em governos de conciliação de classe, sociais-democratas como o governo PT de Lula.
As well as the risks of being co-opted by capital and the state, especially in class conciliation, social democratic governments such as Lula's Workers' Party government.
A dinâmica institucional partidária e a dependência de créditos rurais muitas vezes levam à burocratização, levam ao recuo das pautas e perda de combatividade.
The institutional dynamics of the party and the dependence on rural credit policies often lead to bureaucratization, a retreat from the agenda, and a loss of combativeness.
Por isso, como organização política anarquista, temos que ter uma linha estratégica de atuação nos movimentos sociais, para conseguirmos projetar nossa política de forma eficaz.
Therefore, as an anarchist political organization, we must have a strategic line of action in social movements and popular movements in general, in order to be able to project our policy effectively.
Para coordenar nossos trabalhos e evitar sermos puxados para dentro de redemoinho de tarefas do dia a dia.
To coordinate our work and avoid being pulled into a whirlwind of daily tasks.
Pois se nossos trabalhos estão descoordenados ou sem objetivo definido, corre o risco de serem atropelados por outras políticas das direções nacionais desses movimentos, que muitas vezes não vão priorizar o fortalecimento das bases sociais.
Because if our work is uncoordinated or without defined objectives, it runs the risk of being overrun by other policies of the national leaderships of these movements, which often will not prioritize the strengthening of social bases.
Temos que ter uma leitura sobre o processo histórico da questão agrária brasileira, avaliarmos sua importância estratégica e definirmos qual é nosso papel como organização política anarquista.
We must have an understanding of the historical process of the Brazilian agrarian issue. We must evaluate its strategic importance and define our role as an anarchist political organization.
Ou seja, definirmos onde queremos chegar no longo prazo e quais ações devemos priorizar no dia a dia do trabalho de base para nos aproximarmos desses objetivos.
In other words, we need to define where we want to go in the long term and which actions we should prioritize in our day-to-day grassroots work to get closer to these goals.
E pensar possibilidades de articular territorialmente os diferentes setores de trabalhadores e oprimidos onde trabalhamos.
And we need to think about possibilities for territorially articulating the different sectors of workers and oppressed people with whom we work.
De forma que nosso projeto político consiga influenciar e se torne cada vez mais uma referência político-ideológica e uma referência no processo organizativo das lutas.
So that our political project can influence and increasingly become a political ideological reference and a reference in the organizational process of the struggles.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Super, super, super. Muito, muito, muito bom. E agora, Felipe? Muito obrigado,
Agora
Felipe.
fala a nossa companheira Thaísa.
Tá ótimo. Muito obrigado pela tradução. Você fala melhor do que eu, que vivo aqui 24 anos.
Ô, louco, não, pô. Eu tava tendo uma ajudinha aqui.
Pô, tá ótimo. Obrigada. Oi, linda. Passamos a bola.
Hello,
Thaís, você
comrades.
quer falar português e a gente traduz também? Ou como você quer fazer?
Okay, so Felipe is asking me if I want to speak in Portuguese or in English, but I try to speak in English. If I don't know some words or if I have some difficulty to pass an idea, I can ask you, Felipe, or the other Brazilians that are there. Can we do like that?
Yeah. Perfect. I think everybody is understanding you.
Cool. So yeah, my name is Thaisa. I'm also from OSL. Today I'm talking from the Amazon region in the extreme north of Brazil. Are you okay? Are you understanding me? Because for me, the internet is
Perfect.
a little
It's
slow.
really good. You speak really good. Better than me.
Cool. So today we will talk a little about the Brazilian Indigenous movement. I will try to share a presentation, but maybe I will need some time because of the internet. Wait. It's okay? Are you seeing?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
I cannot pass. I don't know why.
Vai na tela da apresentação, naquele módulo do F5, assim, apresentação, e aí você vai mudando lá de slide. Aí.
Now it's okay. Cool. So yeah, I believe most of you have already come across the discussion about indigenous people and their relevance for the social environmental conservation, not only here in Brazil, but in all the world. But just to reinforce, like here in Brazil, we have at least 30,000 years of history of the presence of that people there in our territory, transforming and developing themselves together with the biomes and all the species that we have here. So during all the history, these people have developed a variety of knowledge related to ecosystem management, and also they developed some values and ways of life that allows a healthier and more sustainable relationship with the environment and the other forms of life in the planet. So here in Brazil, like despite all the colonial efforts to kill these people, to make I think that a true genocide against these people, they continue to exist already, and they are still fighting for the protection of their territories and providing us a lot of valuable knowledge in the fields of the self-management and anti-colonialism, anti-capitalism, and struggles against the oppression in general. So, yeah, today in Brazil, like we have a really huge population of indigenous people. We have more or less like 1 million, and I don't know how can I say that, 1.7 million of indigenous people here in Brazil. But this is official data. Probably we have more because it's not everybody that can recognize it officially, and it is a kind of 1% of our population. They have today around 500 indigenous territories recognized in our territory. In this map, in the left of, here in this map, we can see the indigenous territory that are officially recognized by the Brazilian states. The majority of them are in the Amazon region in the north. I'm more or less here now. And wait. All this population of 1.7 million is shared, is they form the 300 indigenous people, like 300 ethnies different. And all these people, they speak around 274 distinct language. So when we think about Brazil, we always think about the Portuguese language, but the fact is that today we have around 300 different languages here in our country, and people just ignore this. And the majority of these languages are in risk of extinction, so it's very important to defend it now. And as I said, we have around 600 demarcated territories, but it is still less than we need. And this is one of the main struggles of indigenous people today. But talking a little about the history, at the time of the Portuguese invasion, the more than 5 million people who habitated Brazil adopted different strategies to confront the exploitation of the people and also of the ecosystems. In that time, Brazil was called Pindorama, and this territory was a scene of very significant struggles. Here I put two of them, like the Cerco of Piratininga and the Confederation of Cariris, that were not revolutions, but I don't know the traduction in English. Revoltas. How can I say that?
Revolts. Insurrections.
Okay, revolts. Not very difficult. So yeah, we had a lot of revolts. These are two like more recognized, but during the last centuries we had a lot of indigenous revolts, and some of them that were very known here in Brazil too, they were made beside and together with Black people, enslaved peoples. So they have a huge history of fighting against the Brazilian state and for their rights and their territories, not just here in Brazil, but in all Latin America. But after, as the Portuguese invasion advanced through the territory, many of these 5 million people disappeared, and others migrated to the more remote and isolated regions. This is why the majority of them are now here in the Amazon region. But originally, they were more spread in all the Brazilian territory. Still talking a little about history, I think that when we are talking about indigenous struggles and the violence of the state against them, is very important to emphasize the period of our civil military dictatorship. For those who don't know, Brazil is a country marked by the existence of several dictatorships through the 20th century, and the last, called civil military dictatorship, which was even supported by the USA, was a regime that persecuted and killed a lot of indigenous activists, and that prejudicate a lot the indigenous territories. Here you can see some pictures of this, like this one is very iconic for us, is a practice of torture in a street, and that these people is an indigenous people. Here we have direct confronts of that time, and here you can see indigenous people being in the exército. Okay, I don't know how can I say this.
Army.
The army. And yeah, so this is an important period because today one of the struggles, one of the question of the indigenous movement is that's the Brazilian state to recognize all the violations and the violence practiced against them during that period. And talking a little more about our current struggles, yeah, we have some points that I want to talk, but first of all, I want to make a reflection, like to talk with you a little more about what are indigenous people in Brazil in 2024, because I don't know in America, in the USA, but here in Brazil, even when you are talking about with, I don't know, university people or people of the South, we can see a lot of persons who still have the image of an indigenous person that is without clothes in the forest, in a very primitive way of life. But this is not the reality of the majority of the indigenous people here in Brazil. So yeah, we have people of more recent contact, for example, the Yanomami, and these pictures are from them. Like these pictures are very recent, and yeah, so we have some kinds of ethnias and peoples who are living in that way, like more connected to the forest, and they having activities as extractivism and pesca e caça. How can I say that?
Hunting and fishing.
Pesca. Cool. Thank you. But we have, beside of this, another situations. Like these are pictures that I took from an indigenous territory where I used to work. Is a territory called Belém dos Solimões, close to the frontier, to the border with Colombia. And yeah, there they have 5 million, no, how can I say 5 mil? It's 5 million?
5,000.
5,000. 5,000 inhabitants. And yeah, like they have transports, they have schools and a big hospital. And okay, you can see here the children in a school where the teacher speaks just their language. They are Ticuna, so the classes are in Ticuna. When you go to the hospital, people are talking Ticuna. Here is an activity that we made with us. So I'm just sharing that pictures to show you that we have a lot of variety of ways of life of indigenous people here in Brazil. We have a lot of indigenous people also in the cities that they needed to go out of their ancestral territories, sometimes because their territories are not recognized, or like because personal things. And one of the struggles is to maintain the idea that they are indigenous, even if they are not inside of indigenous territories demarcated by the state. So they have the rights of indigenous people, they have their culture, they have to be recognized and respected by that. Here, pictures of another indigenous territory. So like that, you can see another reality too. Though there, they are more close to the cities, but they didn't have bathroom, they don't have water, they still, so they have some difficulties like that. Here, I try to present the idea of that as these people are fighting and having this organization for centuries now, of course, they are very well organized. So we are talking today about the relationship between anarchist people and indigenous movements, but it's very important to recognize that they have all movements very well organized. And I think that the most important here is the APIB, articulation of indigenous people of Brazil. Of course, a PB has is complex, like is, for example, is political alienated, political close to the MST with all the Felipe, can you help me? Com toda, bom,
with all the contradictions.
Isso. A PIB é uma organização que se propõe a representar todos os povos indígenas do Brasil, mas que tem muitas relações assim com o Estado e por isso bastantes contradições, mas ainda assim é uma organização que precisa ser muito respeitada.
Okay, so APIB is indigenous organizations that aims to organize all indigenous people in Brazil, and as a national-wide organization and a very huge organization, it has its contradictions, mainly with this relationship to governments, to political parties, social movements, and so on.
Thank you. So the other one, the foreign, is the organization where I have more contact, is the Federation of Indigenous Organization of Rio Negro. That is the region where I'm working now. And so, yeah, you see, like they have a federation of territories and all the leaderships of the territories are part of the federation. And this federation has a relationship with others. So they have a spread movement that is very internalized in the majority of the country. Here we have pictures of the Acampamento Terra Livre, which is an event organized every year when the indigenous movement go to Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil. Here we have also Teia dos Povos, which is a more recent movement that wants to build, it's not a relationship, rede, like Wi-Fi.
Network.
Is
network.
A network between autonomous territories, including indigenous areas and occupations. So yeah, this is one of the main movements we have now today. And now talking about the main struggles we have today, the first one is the struggle for land demarcation. Do you remember that I told you we have some territories that are officially recognized by the Brazilian government? So yeah, we have today more or less 600, but we have still a lot of groups of indigenous people who are fighting for the land demarcation because it gives them a lot of rights inside of the state and also more protection to them and to their territories. Also, we are today fighting against the law of recognize. Okay, I try to explain. In the more recent years, the Brazilian state tried to approve a law that says that just territories that were occupied before 1988 will be recognized as indigenous officially territories. So, for example, if a group of people goes to a new territory in the year 2000 and try to make a movement to recognize this territory, it will not be possible because this law just recognizes people who started the fight, the struggle before 1988, and this is so dangerous, and is one of the main points of the indigenous movement today. Other one that I think you are more aware is the social environmental conflicts, because we have always a lot of miners, illegal and legal miners, the agribusiness, and also a lot of state projects that are ameaçando
Threatening.
Sorry.
Threatening.
Okay, you understand. So these activities are always these with the indigenous territory, and this is a symbol of the environmental racism. And in the majority of the time, like it's kind of normal to have indigenous activists, indigenous leaderships being killed by people of agribusiness or even by the state, the policy. And the majority of people don't know this or don't care about this. So one of the good things of being here talking about that situation is to make it public, to talk about this kind of violence that we are suffering. And the last one is the struggle for basic social rights inside of the state, because the indigenous movement today has specific health assistance, education, and these are the results of years of struggles and of conflicts with the state. Now, talking a little more about the relationship of OSL and the indigenous movement in Brazil. In the last 2 years, we have been acting together with the CUAP, which is the urban collective in support of indigenous peoples. So in that collective, we have indigenous people and also people that are not indigenous. And we are acting in the state of São Paulo, you can see here in the map, with the people that's called Guarani Mbiá. And there we are developing self-managed projects and all kinds of mutual aid. We have been acting, building school with libertarian perspectives and giving support to the fights for the preservation of the lands, and emphasizing anti-colonial and anti-capitalist struggles. Wait a little, I have to see if I forgot something. Yeah, so our key activities include mutual aid, construction of schools. Also, we did activities related to agroecology, sustainable agriculture, and culture, water distribution, planting. So like we are with them during their day-to-day and trying to organize their struggles that they have in the local. Here we have some photos of manifestations. Here, like the center where we act here we are having what we call is in Portuguese mutirão, that is collective work with the community to build something. And I think that's all. I hope you have understand me. So here you can see the contacts of our organization, OSL. We have our Instagram, and we don't have more X, but okay. And here you can have also the contacts of the indigenous collective where we are acting. So the Coletivo CUAP and our Facebook too. Thank you, people. I hope everything was nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Guys, I think we still have Lorenzo here. Lorenzo is here with us. Oh, Lorenzo, hi. Can you speak like 10, 15 minutes about how your struggle, your life, your things? Then we open for a conversation between you, we all.
Yes, I can do that. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be part of this event and to be to finally meet some of the people who've written me over the years, at least the groups with the Landless workers movement and also the Indigenous movement. Of course, I'm not in Brazil, but I've received a ton of mail every so often from Brazil, from comrades in Brazil, about the struggle there in that country. And it's intrigued me enough that I'd like to go someday, but I don't know now. I'm 77 years old, so I may not make it. But at any rate, thank you very much for allowing me on. Let me just speak a few minutes about my life and activism as a anarchist, and point out, first of all, I've been an anarchist for over 50 years now. And so I guess the largest portion of my life. And one of the things that I tried to do, or I did do, was to write a book called Anarchism and the Black Revolution. And that book has allowed me to give a perspective about Black organizers and the Black movement that was taking place in the 1960s. And it was written from the standpoint of the international anarchist movement, and certainly the anarchist movement in North America should be in objective unity with the Black movement. Unfortunately, it took a long time for me to get this through to activists in North America. I received a great deal of pushback over the idea, and not a lot of understanding about why there should be a Black anarchist tendency in the United States and in other parts of the world. And that tendency should have its own ideology in terms of those things that pertain to them as an oppressed people within a majority white society, and that it should be able to build a new kind of united front where the Black people wouldn't be without a voice in the movement, but and the anarchist movement and other social revolutionary movements would be solidarity movements. Well, we have not yet gotten to that point in all the years that I've struggled over the idea. But the book has been one thing that I've been able to effectively put out some of my ideas and some of my research and study and travel and so forth and what have you over the years I've been an anarchist. Now, I'm one that doesn't believe in anarchism just as some kind of social theory, but rather that anarchism is a living revolutionary doctrine for revolutionary social change. And I've continued to believe that. And whatever form or whatever movements I've united with in the anarchist movement internationally, whether it was syndicalism, anarchist communism, or as I'm involved now with Black autonomy, which is just a form of Black anarchism. And it's an unfortunate reality that we have so far yet to go. And I can't say that I have been able to pull the entire anarchist movement over to my side. I have gotten respect for some of the ideas of anti-racism, for instance. And that was an important development because the truth is the anarchist movement never talked about the oppression, the historical oppression or the current oppression of peoples of color, Black people and other peoples of color. That has never really factored into the anarchist movement and the anarchist thinking. So my writings stem from a premise that what was happening in the 1960s, a radical Black movement, not just the Black Panther Party, but there were other wings of the Black civil rights and Black power movements that were far to the left, farther to the left than some of the communist parties and some of these other organizations. And these movements had effectively challenged the state, the American government, more effectively than all of the other movements that existed, you know, going all the way back to, you know, the founding of the Communist Party and all these other groups. There was a whole decade or more of Black radicalism that was autonomous of the ruling party, that was autonomous of the so-called white left, and other organizations that were affected, in fact, by the rise of the Black movement. The Black movement in the 1960s is one of the things that led to the foundation of radical white feminism. That's what it was. One of the things that led to the rise of the gay rights movement, that led to so many cultural movements and social movements at that time, some of which exist today, of course, but they are in a different form. They are much more reformist and in line with the state. Well, the Black Power movement was a radical movement that encompassed many sectors of the Black struggle. And that movement was what really transformed that historical period. And whatever so-called rights or the end of whatever indignities that Black people had to suffer were as a result of both the civil rights and the Black Power movement. And the Black Power movement superseded the civil rights movement in the year 1960. And it was student and youth based. And as we're discovering now, it was also community based. A number of local community organizations came into existence and waged fights in their city and their region and so forth. And a lot of this isn't necessarily been documented to a great degree. But this is one of the things that affected me. And I became an anarchist, a radical first, but later an anarchist, after I was captured, having hijacked a plane to Cuba and escaped the country and then left Cuba and went somewhere else. But after I was captured in Germany, I was brought back to the United States and I was put in the Federal House of Detention, as it was then known. It's called something else now. But in that facility, and this was in September of 1969, so we were having an anniversary of sorts. In September of 1969, I met Martin Sostre, who was a Black anarchist. He was a Black Puerto Rican. And I'd gone to him originally for help with my criminal case, since I faced the death penalty for hijacking a plane. I was considered a death penalty charge, almost like treason. And I went to talk to Martin Sostre, who everyone told me was a jailhouse lawyer. And we talked for some time. And he helped me with my case. He helped me avoid the death penalty provisions of my case. He explained to me what I had to do. One is to expose the fact that I was kidnapped and tortured and brought back to the United States against my will and illegally. And I used that and the threat of, making that a public issue and having a long drawn out extradition hearing to get rid of the death penalty provisions. Now, after I had done this, and I was always talking to Martin Sawstreet, we began to talk about politics, revolutionary politics. And when I came back, I was already an activist. It wasn't a question of that. I'd been a civil rights activist. I'd been a Black radical activist and so forth. But I was not an anarchist, and I was not sympathetic to anarchism. And one of the reasons for that is because anarchism was white, middle class, and really distanced from Black working class struggles. It had nothing to do with Black working class struggles. And even the war in Vietnam, which was raging at that time, the white radicals in the anti-war movement and in the so-called left, white left, had nothing to do with Black people.
Absolutely. Lorenzo, look, we're here now with MST and Indigenous and FAISCA publication and Autonomedia and many anarchists. We really for me, is a really special opportunity to change some ideas now. Let's open
I'm getting to that.
And create a kind of conversation between us. Is okay?
Well, yes, of course.
Because you just have 20 minutes and have many people, many questions, many things to talk about.
Well, I guess maybe I should just let them ask me the questions then.
Yeah, no, for everybody. We all together now. You, MST, Indigenous, and we all. Is okay?
All right.
Let's open for everybody. Because I have some questions about the articulation between the Black movement, the Indigenous movement, the Landless movement. You know how because I know how the Indigenous movement articulate. Sorry, guys, I lost my voice because but I mean, you know how maybe Philippe, you can articulate better than me the question.
Yes, questions.
Okay, do you want to talk to people there, Black, to see?
No, I think I do like to talk between we first before open to the other. You know what I mean? I mean, how we can articulate between, MST, Indigenous, Black people. How can we create a kind, or how we imagine that? How could be? I don't know. Is it like some strategy? I don't know, Philippe. Sorry, guys. I'm kind of tired. Well, you want some thoughts, Jim? Jean is here, also from Autonomedia, published here from New York.
Hi, Lorenzo. I think you're in Chattanooga, right?
I'm in Chattanooga, right?
Yeah. Have you made any contacts with indigenous movements in North America?
I have not been able to make any contacts with indigenous movements per se. I was part of the movement in support of Leonard Peltier. I was in prison with Leonard Peltier, in fact, and also with Standing
Rock.
Standing Rock, right? Thank you. I was in prison with those comrades, and we had, in fact, we had built an organization of political prisoners, Black, Native, Puerto Rican, and others. And we built an organization, the Marion Brothers Defense Committee. And that was, during the time I was in prison. So, but after I have left prison, I have not run into many, I run into some indigenous organizations in the United States. The problem is, in the United States, people are fixated on the specifics of their autonomous movements, and not in terms of a broad-based, I guess I want to call it a solidarity movement. We support each other. And that's one of the things. When I was in prison, I tried to make the prisoners and the prisoners activists understand that when we build a broad-based movement, that doesn't mean that we don't have our own specific programs and understanding of our oppression, but there's differences, and we need to unite around the differences as well as around the things we have in common. And it's an important lesson for the United States, especially, but I'm assuming also even in a country like Brazil, to bring different oppressed peoples together, to not ignore their circumstances, ignore their histories as slaves or whatever, you know. And like the United States and Brazil both have had slavery. So we can't ignore those things and the effect of those things in this period, what it does. And so I've tried to say for years that we need to have an international solidarity movement, and that we need to organize and bring in people from communities of color, whether they're Black or Indigenous people in the United States, or whatever, bring those people in to be part of the anarchist movement. It has for years just been basically a white middle class movement. So I know that's changing.
We start to change. I have just a question for the MST now, people, because it's like how MST can integrate with indigenous. I know the MST have been feed indigenous in Brazil in all the struggle things. Meu lindo, eu estou falando aqui como que o MST pode integrar com os indígenas e o movimento negro no Brasil, porque eu sei que o MST tem alimentado os indígenas por muito tempo e muitos momentos muito difíceis, entendeu? Quer dizer, como é que, nesses momentos críticos, como é que a gente se articula? Você pode traduzir para o Lourenço agora e depois a gente traduz para ele, por favor, Felipe? Obrigado.
Lorenzo, just for you to know, and so hello, and just for you to know, Comrade Black is asking the MST comrade to explain how the movement is articulating with other sector of oppressed classes like the indigenous people in Brazil and also other urban sectors and so on. So Comrade Gabriel will talk about that now, okay?
Eu acho que fundamental são ações de solidariedade de classe e ações de apoio mútuo entre os diferentes setores oprimidos da sociedade.
Okay, so Gabriel is saying that the way for this articulation is to work with solidarity actions based on class and also mutual aid through this different sector of the oppressed people throughout Brazil and the world.
O MST tem feito ações de doações de alimento, de ações de cozinhas solidárias, assim como outros movimentos, outros grupos também têm feito ações semelhantes, mas é fundamental que os diferentes movimentos do campo e da cidade, sindicatos, movimentos e grupos e coletivos de um mesmo território, é fundamental que todos eles busquem dialogar e se organizar para a defesa de seus territórios e para realizarem ações de apoio mútuo entre si.
Okay, so he is saying that the MST, the Landless movement, has been working with food donations and with projects of popular solidarity kitchens. And these projects are important to articulate movements from the fields, from the countryside, and from the cities, like unions, like other movements. And he is also saying that it's very important for people to articulate movements, groups, collectives on the territory and try to articulate, to organize these movements, these groups, and try to start dialoguing, try to start articulating, and to put an end of that kind of fragmentalization of the whole movements and groups. And it's very important to articulate all these initiatives.
Thank you so much, guys. I need to open now for questions here with the people, okay? Because we just have 10 minutes. Guys, here, we have some questions for them. I mean, I really would like to hear for you guys. Really thank you for coming and participate in this way. And it would be amazing if you have some questions for MST Indigenous do Brasil, Lourenço, or FAISCA. Someone?
What would be the best way for white leftists to help with the Black liberation, Indigenous liberation movement?
Can you thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello. I was asking, what do you consider the best way for white leftists to assist with the Black liberation and Indigenous liberation movements?
Just a second. Felipe, você pode traduzir pro MST?
Ela está perguntando como as pessoas de esquerda brancas, né, podem se articular com movimentos negros e também com movimentos de camponeses indígenas, é isso?
É isso mesmo.
Aqui, em relação ao MST, existem diferentes formas das pessoas apoiarem o movimento. Por exemplo, seja com campanhas, ações pontuais, mesmo que as pessoas vivam nas cidades, nas grandes cidades, o movimento tem espaços de diálogo com a sociedade. Por exemplo, existe um espaço chamado Armazém do Campo, onde são vendidos produtos dos assentamentos, são realizadas atividades culturais, debates políticos, e são espaços onde as pessoas podem tomar contato com o movimento e apoiar. Da mesma forma, nas cidades pequenas, onde existem, no interior, onde existem os assentamentos e acampamentos, o movimento trabalha com diferentes temáticas, questões das mulheres, LGBT, questão negra, questão da produção, da comercialização, da cultura, e realiza diferentes ações nos assentamentos a partir desses temas. Então, são também espaços, são formas que as pessoas podem contribuir, podem apoiar, mesmo não sendo militantes do movimento, mas podem contribuir pontualmente e realizar alguma forma de apoio e solidariedade.
Okay, so Gabriel is saying that in the movement, the Landless movement, there are different ways to support the movement, with campaigns, with punctual, with some actions, and even to people that lives in the cities. The movement has spaces to the dialogue with the urban people, the urban movements, and so on. And he is giving an example of something that is called the Armazém do Campo. It's a kind of popular countryside store that the movement organizes in the cities to sell its production, so to sell agrarian production, but it is also a space where the movement organizes cultural activities. And so this is a space where people that are not part of the movement can connect with the movement and support the movement and struggle together with the movement. And he also said that there are small cities where the movement has its most huge presence, the settlements, the what we call camps, when the families just occupy the land and establish the first houses. In these cities, there are possibility to meet people from the movement, because the movement is every time realizing mobilization regarding issues like land, like production, but also like gender, like race, like culture, and different actions. So the cities is always a space to connect with the movement and to support the movement. It's important to say, and Gabriel said that different people can articulate, can support the movement, but it's important to say that, as he said before, the movement has all the limitations of a movement with some million members, and then this huge social movement in Brazil have its own contradictions. So it's important not just to be there, not just to support the movement, but also to articulate, to organize with the movement, within the movement, with a revolutionary project, and to contribute in building this popular power strategy.
Okay, Felipe, now Thais want to talk. Let's listen, Thais. Thank you, Thais.
Hey, yeah, so I want to contribute a little, talking about an experience that we are having here in Brazil that is called Teia dos Povos. In a translation, we could say web of people or something like that. I'm not saying this is the best way of doing that relationships or alliance, but it's a way that I think it's okay, and we are kind of experiencing this now in the web of the people. We have, okay, I will try to explain a little how the organization works. The proposal is to have a lot of autonomous and fighting territories together. And these territories are the majority ancestral Black people territories or indigenous territories, and also occupations, rural occupations and urban occupations. And the objective, the proposal of the Teia dos Povos is to make not a web, is to make a network of these people in mutual aid activities. For example, if we have one urban occupation that is having conflict with the state, this urban occupation that makes part of the TEIA can call the other territories, and they can organize one activity there, like to promote the struggle and to have more visibility, and also to do practical things. For example, to build a school or to make a garden, you know. So they have all these kind of practices. And about the collaboration of the white people, or I don't know, rich people, if you are not part of that kind of territory, like if you're not indigenous, you are not a quilombola that is descendant of this, I don't know how to explain Quilombola, but they are kind of ancestral territories of Black people. So if you're not part of this, you can help the movement, making a link between them. So you will help the organization of events, you will help the structure of the organization, but you don't have a lot of power in the discussions, in the way where the movement goes. So this is a kind of mutual aid and solidarity between autonomous territories and between Black people, Indigenous people, and people who are living in squats or occupation. And we also have some place to people who are not from that kind of territories, but they are inside the struggles and they are always contributing.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, look, we need to finalize because now we have other workshop. I'm really thank you, everybody. I really thanks to everybody. And we hope this is just the beginning, you know. I mean, I hope this can really start things, you know. Thank you, everybody here. We really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So that was a very good afternoon. Bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, let's start your workshop. Please,
Can you turn?
What?
Can you turn the camera around so I can see what the room looks like?
Oh, sure.
I'm just curious. All right.
Yeah, Jim says the internet's back, so I don't think they need your husband anymore. Thank you.
We say now. Okay, good. Also, Jim is here.
Hey, Spencer.
Oh, hey, what's going on? It's been a hot minute.
Spencer, are you there? Are you muted?
No, he's freezing.
Yeah.
Can you see me? I look fine.
Now it's good.
Yeah,
now it's good.
I looked fine. Hey, been a hot minute, Jim.
Yeah. Are you still in New York?
Yes, you should tell people that.
That's your cover story?
Yeah. So yeah, is everything going well? Are you going to be the MC or something?
No, I'm just attendee.
Oh, okay. Adrian's, are you going to do the Q&A? I'm going to try to make it less than an hour.
No, look, my lord, I cannot even talk anymore.
She's losing her voice.
I lose my voice.
Okay.
I can't. That's Jean is here. You know, Jean will be together with you.
Oh, okay. I was asking.
All right. Well, I am this a new role for me, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
I gotta have a piss first, though.
Oh, do it.
Occupies territory, and the police are there not to.
Sorry, Spencer, we have to work like without stop.
But don't worry about it.
Without stop. Just a second.
To brutalize us and murder us because they have their orders to do so. And just as the soldiers in Vietnam have their orders to destroy the Vietnamese people, the police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property because we own no property. They couldn't possibly be there to see that we receive the due process of law for the simple reason that the police themselves deny us the due process of law. And so it's very apparent that the police are only in our community, not for our security, but the security of the business owners in the community, and also to see that the status quo is kept intact.
Why y'all gonna murder me and not even say, I'm sorry? Y'all murder niggas. Y'all murder niggas like it was the thing to do. And y'all can't even apologize. Y'all apologize if you run with somebody's cat. Y'all apologize if you can't pay a rent on time. Y'all apologize if you have to raise taxes. But when you just start flat on murdering niggas that are asleep, y'all can't even say, I'm sorry.
Let's go. We have a big line to the restaurant. Take time. Do you want to start like present yourself, present your topic, and
Sure,
so
I can,
on?
I
Thank
can
you.
introduce myself.
Thank you.
We ready to go?
Yes, let it go. It's you.
Okay. So, hey, everybody. My name's Spencer Sunshine. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I've been at most of the book fairs, actually, since it started. And what I'm going to do today is talk about my new book. It's called Neo-Nazi Terrorism and Countercultural Fascism, The Origins and Afterlife of James Mason's Siege, which was released this May on Routledge. And in particular, what I'm going to do is focus on the role of a clique of people in the 1980s countercultural scene who are crucial to this neo-Nazi book being published. And because it's the book fair, I'm also going to work in a bunch about how anarchists participated or interacted or oppose the people in this book. So James Mason's Siege is one of these unusual cases in which a single ideological book drives a political strain. In this case, it's the canonical text of a wing of contemporary neo-Nazism which openly advocates terrorism. Siege rejects all legal political actions. It advocates not just guerrilla warfare, but lone wolf attacks, mass murder, and riots, and it praises Charles Manson as the new neo-Nazi guru. Several neo-Nazi groups base their ideology on this book, the best known of which is the Atomwaffen Division, who've been linked to 5 murders. All members of Atomwaffen were required to, as the hashtag goes, read Siege, and one described it as their Bible. More generally, politics based on the book are called siege culture, and then this in turn has developed a number of shifting Telegram channels which are dubbed Terrorgram. All of these follow the doctrine of accelerationism. This advocates collapsing the current political system entirely in hopes of seizing power afterwards and establishing a national socialist state. And of course, there's some varieties of accelerationism in other political movements, but this is the focus for siege culture amongst national socialists. For them, the praxis for this is violence, usually in the form of single-actor massacres. And neo-Nazi accelerationists can be found throughout North and South America, in Eastern and Western Europe, and even encroaching in the Middle East. And we can document at least a dozen murders linked to siege or siege culture and terrorgram, and that number seems only to be increasing. And in addition to this, there's several dozen neo-Nazis from this milieu who are in prison and around the world, who've been arrested around the world. So the first half of my book involves a part of U.S. neo-Nazi history that's been almost entirely overlooked. And I think this is important because it's when the template for the contemporary movement was set. So people may know before World War II, it was acceptable in the mainstream to support Nazi Germany. And there were also some groups here in the United States trying to make this country a national socialist state. Obviously, these groups disbanded during the war. And afterwards, it took these kinds of politics were delegitimized. And it took quite a while for National Socialists to reestablish themselves. In 1959, George Lincoln Rockwell's American Nazi Party was founded. And this was the first open neo-Nazi party of the post-war era. They wore brown shirts, they waved swastika flags, and they praised Hitler. Now, the group was mostly small. It acted kind of like an agitprop theater group. And while Rockwell was seen as a clown, within 2 decades, these neo-Nazi theatrics would turn into murder. In addition to opening a kind of a public political space for neo-Nazism, Rockwell's other contribution was to Americanize National Socialism by making some important ideological changes. And these, again, are things that are still in effect today. The most important of these was a decision to change the master race from Aryan to white, and this made it fit American identity categories. So, for example, for Hitler, Slavs, he considered them to be Untermensch, to be subhumans, and now in the American version, they too became Aryans and part of the master race. And this is important to us for the story because in 1966, 14-year-old James Mason joined this party. The next year, the party's name was changed and Rockwell was assassinated. It was now had the unwieldy name of the National Socialist White People's Party, or the NSWPP. And there's a bunch of acronyms, so I'm just going to call it the parent party from now on. The leader who replaced Rockwell was a very unpopular guy, and in about a decade, at least 10 different groups splintered off of it. What they did then was to try out a bunch of different strategies. They were searching for a new direction to take, but in doing that, they tried to fuse together, they split, and they created a bunch of infighting, right? But the different strategies they chose or tried out became the different basic options that neo-Nazis will use today. So, for example, in Chicago, they tried to do grassroots organizing to some successful extent in Marquette Park. This became the basis of a famous court case. Now, I found out if you're Gen X or older, everybody knows, and if you're a millennial or younger, you probably don't. It's called the Skokie incident. It was a Supreme Court case where it finally decided it was legal for neo-Nazis, finally decided for sure it was legal for neo-Nazis to march. Some of the other splinter groups did things like forming dues-paying membership parties that made propaganda, or holding high-profile rallies that were designed to turn into brawls, or to run for office. And the most famous guy who did this was David Duke. But what I found in doing my research, because I said this stuff isn't well documented, was that a terrorist wing also developed amongst these splinters. So the most famous of these was William Pierce's National Alliance. This group would become the largest neo-Nazi group in the US in the 1990s. And Pierce was best known for writing a race war fantasy novel called The Turner Diaries. And this helped inspire the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, where 168 people were killed. One of the other terrorist groups that was important to this story is the National Socialist Liberation Front, the NSLF, which was formed in 1974. And what it did was model itself, really kind of rip off new left armed struggle groups like the Symbionese Liberation Army and the Weather Underground. The NSLF took their graphics, took their slogans, said they were going to start a campaign of guerrilla warfare. And they did a number of bombings, mostly of like Marxist bookstores, but no one was hurt in them. The most important thing about them was not just the guerrilla aspect, but they adopted the 1960s countercultural style. It was a real break from the parent party. It had been very culturally conservative. People had to have certain haircuts and such things. People didn't listen to rock music. And so instead, this new group, the NSLF, they wore fatigues, had long hair, you could smoke pot and such. And this opened up a sort of greater variety, a greater option for people, young people who are interested in the fashion and culture of their day, to become neo-Nazis. In this group, Mason joined this group secretly in 1976. Now, just before he did, and this is an interesting story, he co-founded his own group called the National Socialist Movement. Their goal was to try to push these other neo-Nazi splinters towards violence. And this is the same group that exists today that was very important, especially in the aughts and the teens, and was present at Charlottesville. In 1977 was the first mass murder by a neo-Nazi in the United States, so fairly recently. This guy, Frederick Cowan, tried to kill his boss at the Neptune Worldwide Moving Company, just north of the city in New Rochelle in Westchester. And it's at this point, so the real violence starts to break out from neo-Nazis, not from Klan or other white supremacists, but from neo-Nazis, and a bunch of other single-actor killings follow. Most of the neo-Nazis tried to distance themselves from these murders, seeing them as delegitimizing their movement, but Mason counterintuitively saw potential in them. So, for example, he had been in the parent party with Joseph Paul Franklin, and Franklin became a serial killer who murdered up to 22 people, mostly mixed race couples. And he was but he became most famous for shooting and paralyzing Larry Flynt, who published the porn magazine Hustler. They made a movie out of him. It's called The People versus Larry Flynt. Stars Courtney Love, strangely. But Mason started reflecting on all this sectarian infighting in the 1970s. And what he did is he decided there was no point in any kind of legal political action. He decided, and I think he was right about this, that no one in our society was going to allow a neo-Nazi party to take power. And so he went about looking for a different approach. In 1980, he started the newsletter Siege, and this is where he developed his new ideas. It was a 6-page newsletter. He mimeographed it himself, and he never made more than 100 copies. But what he advocated would be extremely prescient. He went beyond mere guerrilla warfare and became one of the first neo-Nazis, if not the very first, to advocate lone wolf attacks. He started doing this in the late 70s. He praised racialized massacres, assassinations, bombings, and civil unrest. And he counseled that if you were going to commit murder, to do it in a highly visible and stylized manner. And this in particular would become very influential today. At least within his own worldview, the point of these acts was that they might have the potential to destabilize the system, as he called it, another idea he takes from the 60s and 70s left. So for example, in reference to one wide-scale racial conflict, he said, quote, "What if there currently were 6 or a dozen of them? The power to break the system does exist." Now, in the early 80s, he starts to also embrace the remaining armed elements of the new left. And so, in particular, he was excited by the 1981 Brinks robbery in Nyack, New York. And there's when former members of the Weather Underground, then in a group called the May 19th Communist Organization, as well as people who had been in the Black Liberation Army, knocked over an armored car And in that, and as they fled, they killed 3 people. The anarchist Kwasi Balagoon is one of the people arrested for this. In the big dragnet, so was Laura Whitehorn, who you may have run into in circles in New York. Now, Mason didn't advocate an alliance with the left per se, but he did start cheering on these attacks by the remaining armed parts of the New Left and by Black nationalists as part of his hopes that they would help destabilize the system. At the same time, he also had a practice of writing to prisoners, and through this, he became close to cult leader Charles Manson. Although this is often overlooked, Manson was a racist, an anti-Semite, misogynist, and of course he had a swastika tattooed on his forehead. So Mason proclaimed Charlie the new neo-Nazi guru, and he developed a semi-spiritual system called the New Order, which combines Charles Manson's ideas with National Socialism. It was very kind of strange stuff. Now, by the late 1970s, parts of the white supremacist movement had also turned to revolutionary violence. And so, for example, in 1983, a terrorist group called the Order was formed, and they murdered a Jewish talk show host in Denver, Colorado. In 1988, the Nazi skinhead movement exploded in the US, and each year, skins committed more and more murders. So, for example, a decade later found that skinheads had killed about 50 people. And while all of these murders weren't done by Nazi skins, most of them done were by them or other far-right skinheads, including a famous one in Queens where 3 of them killed a gay man. But by 1986, Mason had admitted his message hadn't gotten through to his fellow neo-Nazis. This violence hadn't been inspired by him, and so he folded up Siege. But just before he did that, and this is the counterculture part of our story, he attracted a bunch of attention from a very different quarter, and this changed his life. And it came in the form of 4 people who were involved in what I dubbed, because this is what we used to call it, the extreme culture scene. It was a sort of a branch off of punk rock. It had an air of comparative sophistication, and it involved musicians, writers, publishers, and filmmakers. The scene fetishized extremes for their own sake, including serial killers, pedophilia and child murder, cult leaders, specifically including Charles Manson, Hitler, eugenics and dysgenics, and necrophilia. And while a lot of it was in the Bay Area, it also took hold as one of the parts of the mid-'80s so-called downtown scene in the East Village. Now, this sort of was loosely related to punk rock and avant-garde scenes and spoken word and free jazz and such stuff, but because it encompassed so many things, this became affixed to one edge of it. This extreme culture scene was also closely connected to industrial music. This is the precursor to stuff. Some people are familiar with bands like Industry and Front 242. This is a precursor, related genre almost. It was a kind of no-chord, atonal music that started in the mid-'70s. The best-known band of this is Throbbing Gristle. And then later, industrial music became tied to neofolk music, which sounds quite different, so it's a strange tie. It's a dramatic, dark, medieval-sounding acoustic music. It had a lot of Nazi references, in no small part because the founding band of it, Death and June, are cultural fascists. In fact, in this whole milieu in the extreme culture scene, there was a lot of Nazi imagery and a lot of Nazi references, but it was unclear whether it was critique, provocation, irony, sympathy, or adherence. And in the pre-internet age, this was really difficult to clear up. You would just see like one part of this. It would be hard to get information. You couldn't contact the people. And this was very useful because these guys, the ones who actually were attached to neo-Nazis or were neo-Nazis, used this ambiguity and this lack of information to avoid being pinned down about their politics. So it's very same as a lot of alt-right people today, or the remaining alt-right people, where like, it's a joke and you can't really tell if it is or it's not. So one of the biggest arguments about the neo-Nazi ties within the scene involved the industrial musician Boyd Rice, who for many years had denied his involvement with neo-Nazism. He tried to have an art show in Manhattan in 2018, and it was canceled finally, but only after a bitter dispute. And there was actually a clear piece of evidence for this. There's a photo of him with the Nazi skinhead leader Bob Hike of the skinhead gang, the American Front, and this even appeared in a popular teen magazine, Sassy. But still, for decades, he was able to semi-successfully downplay and dismiss these accusations. But what I found in the archives, where I did a lot of my research, were all these handwritten letters he had made to Mason that showed he was directly connected to some of the most violent neo-Nazis of the time. There's swastikas on the letters, signs them with an 88. If you're interested in the Boyd Rice angle, I made a video called Boyd Rice, Neo-Nazi Collaborator, and it's available on YouTube. Now, Rice was important. He became interested in Hitler and Charles Manson, and then he met another white supremacist who told him there was a neo-Nazi who was friends with Charles Manson. And so in 1986, right before Siege ended, Rice wrote James Mason a gushing fan letter and immediately suggested that these newsletters be turned into a book. He also promptly introduced Mason to publisher Adam Parfrey, who he described as being from Jew York. And Parfrey, in turn, also became fascinated by Mason. Now, Parfrey lived in New York City in the second half of the 80s. He worked at the Strand bookstore by Union Square. He co-published an art magazine with George Petros called Exit. And in Exit, Mason was published for the first time outside of neo-Nazi circles. Parfrey started a press called Amok. And in 1987, he first published a well-known cult hit called Apocalypse Culture. It was an anthology. And this was the first book that Mason was in. In the 1990s, Parfrey's next press, called Feral House, became quite famous during the period of fascination with conspiracy theories that was popular amongst the slacker movement, which is a sort of pre-hipster, very ironic resistance to work movement that happened at the time. Movies were made about Feral House books, such as Ed Wood. And so Parfrey was so well known that when he died in 2018, there was a sizable obituary for him in the New York Times. And it, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, did not mention that he had been involved quite closely with James Mason and Siege. Like the others, despite his connections, especially to Holocaust deniers, he always denied being a neo-Nazi. And he said his interest in people like Mason was just part of a general fascination with these kinds of extremes. So Rice also introduced James Mason to Michael Moynihan. This was a much younger industrial musician who moved to playing neofolk in the band Blood Axis. And Moynihan played a very important role in Siege's creation. The three of them were joined by a fourth person, a Satanist named Nicholas Schreck. He was the second person to put James Mason in a book, another kind of cult hit anthology called The Manson File. Again, this book was published by Parfrey. And then Schreck was the first person to put James Mason in a documentary. This was called Charles Manson Superstar, and I think I watched it on YouTube or Vimeo if you want to see it. It's okay. A lot of it's based on an interview with Charles Manson, I think at San Quentin. And so these four people, Rice, Parfrey, Schreck, and Moynihan, were part of the Abraxas Foundation, or were the Abraxas Foundation, which was a fake, quote, occult fascist think tank. And then what they did is recruited a larger circle around them, and it included people like the violent white supremacist leader, Tom Metzger, who was in the White Aryan Resistance. And both Rice and Schreck went on Tom Metzger's show called Race and Resistance. It was a cable access TV show. Now, these four guys who were in the Abraxas Foundation worked for many years to sell Mason to a countercultural audience. And this all culminated with Moynihan publishing the Siege newsletters, editing them into an anthology, and then publishing it himself in 1993. And a little bit strangely, the four of them also all became tied to Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. Moynihan and Rice were priests in the church. Parfrey published LaVey after the 90s. And then Schreck married Anton LaVey's daughter, Zena. Around this time, Mason was also arrested for taking nude photos of 15 and 16-year-olds. And he clearly liked, his letters show he clearly liked girls who were even younger. In one of these letters, he said that there should be TV talk shows with, quote, a few father-daughter teams who have sex, just swear by it and love it all the way. And in addition to this, he had met some really aggressive 12-year-olds and even younger. So as I said, Moynihan published Siege, the first edition, in 1993. A few years later, in 1998, his own book, Lords of Chaos, came out, once again published by Adam Parfrey. This was about the Norwegian black metal scene. It was one of the first books about this, about like Varg Vikernes of Burzum. He had interviewed him in prison, and this became yet another underground cult classic. And a few years ago, it was made into a pretty bad movie. I went and saw it in Queens with Kevin Coogan, who passed away a few years ago, who a lot of this work I'm talking about is an extension of stuff he wrote either in his book Dreamer of the Day or in a well-known essay called How Black is Black Metal. So in the introduction to the first edition of Siege, Moynihan said he hoped people carried out the ideas in there. But after Lords of Chaos came out, Moynihan, just like these others, didn't want to mess his career up, and now he claimed he had never been a neo-Nazi. In 1995, Mason went to jail for threatening his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, and this became the end of his major period of political involvement. He got out, at least until recently, he got out of jail in 1999 and created a sort of idiosyncratic version of Christianity in jail that involved racism, anti-Semitism, and UFOs. And then he self-published a few books when he got out. So because this is the book fair, I want to talk a bit about the intersection of anarchists in all this. So first, just to be clear, most anarchists just hated Mason. He was a neo-Nazi. But around the edges, that wasn't a completely universal opinion. And some people were interested in him, and especially regarding Adam Parfrey. Parfrey had a variety of relationships with anarchists. So the first part of this is a really interesting story I found out, I hadn't known before, and it's about two anarchists and syndicalists who became neo-Nazis and helped Mason. The first was a guy named John or Gary Jewell. He played a walk-on role, but I met a few wobs in town who knew him from the 70s. He was a Canadian syndicalist. He was very active in the IWW in the 70s. He was even on the GEB for 3 terms. This is the General Executive Board. It's sort of the administrative body of the wobs. But there, another wobbly told me that he was, quote, a very explosive, angry, divisive character. So he left the Union in 1978, but the next year he popped up and declared he was a third position fascist, a kind of anti-capitalist fascist. He started a paper called Direct Action, and he joined up with Tom Metzger's White Aryan Resistance and even became a staff writer for his newspaper. He was important to the story because in 1982, he met James Mason, and Mason needed someone to visit Charles Manson to be an in-between. Manson was in prison in California, and so Jewell suggested another neo-Nazi named Perry Red Worthen. Now, Worthen had also been in the IWW in the 70s and on the GEB as well. He had a really wild background. He's sort of my favorite person in the book, and there's dozens and dozens of characters in the book. At age 14, he was put in a state hospital, a kind of youth mental institution, I think, for being a pyromaniac. And while he was there, he murdered a 10-year-old. When he got out, he became a biker and then a pacifist anarchist. And he started this thing called the Woodstock Anarchist Party. And I'm going to show you my Woodstock Anarchist Party pin. They were a well-known sort of project in the 70s amongst anarchists. They put out a pretty good magazine called the Anarchist Black Hammer. If you go to the Tamiment archive at NYU, they have all the issues there. In the magazine, he loudly supported political movements by people of color, like Cesar Chavez, United Farm Workers, and he championed LGBTQ plus people. And this was not a common position amongst many anarchists at that time. But like Jewell in the late 70s, he quit the wobs, he shut down his party, and then he popped back up announcing he was a neo-Nazi. So Mason, on Jewell's suggestion, he reached out to Red Worthen, and he convinced him to visit Charles Manson in prison on his behalf, and Worthen did that 4 times. Now, Worthen was living in Oroville, California at the time, and at age 41, he recruited a bunch of teenagers to his neo-Nazi group, and then in turn murdered one of them who was age 17. So he went to prison for this and then converted to fundamentalist Christianity and then died in 1999. So he had he was a life of I'd say, contradictions and reinventions. Now, some of the other anarchists there were involved in the pro-situ scene. This was a kind of anarchism that really developed in the 80s and 90s. It sort of died out after the WTO demonstrations in 1999. It was loosely based on the politics of the Situationist International. Some of the best-known figures in the scene were Bob Black, Hakim Bey, John Zerzan, and magazines like AJODA, which is Anarchy, a Journal of Desire Armed, and Fifth Estate. And these kinds of politics, these pro-situ politics, influenced the later insurrectionist scene, including Aragorn and Wolfie Landstryker, if people are familiar with them. At the time, the anarchist scene was super countercultural, even more so than now. And so many people in the scene, or really anyone in the publishing part of it, would have been familiar with Adam Parfrey. As I said, Mason's first appearance in a book was in Parfrey's Apocalypse Culture. And then alongside him were published Hakim Bey and John Zerzan. And in fact, starting in 2005, Feral House became Zerzan's main publisher, and I think at this point have put out 7 of his books. In 1989, Parfrey was the publisher and co-editor of the anthology Rants with the anarchist Bob Black, and although they did later have a falling out. And so at the time he's doing this book with Bob Black, Parfrey's in direct contact with Mason, and he's even having discussions with him about publishing Mason's book about George Lincoln Rockwell. And then later, Parfrey's thanked in Siege in 1993. Parfrey also had connections with anarchists like Jason McQuinn, who was the publisher of AJOTA, Anarchy magazine. And so, for example, just after the Oklahoma City bombing, McQuinn reprinted a conspiratorial rant by Parfrey called Finding Our Way Out of Oklahoma. He did this in a separate magazine he ran called Alternative Press Review. And it's a really kind of wild essay. He accuses, he attacks, Clinton, who was the president, for being against the militias. He claims there was we had to investigate whether microchips were put in Timothy LaVey's buttocks, really wild stuff. I don't know why McQuinn printed this. Although there were anarchists who did criticize him and criticize this essay in particular. And the best criticism was from Janet Beale, who was part of Murray Bookchin's Institute for Social Ecology. She wrote a piece called The Fallacy of Neither Left Nor Right, Militia Fever. She attacked the Oklahoma City essay, as well as Parfrey's advocacy of left-right alliances and his dismissal of anti-Semitism. And she concluded the essay by saying, quote, "The left has nothing to learn from paranoid racists, no matter how psychedelic their conspiracies may be." So when Siege was first published, it got distributed through 3 avenues. The first, of course, was through neo-Nazis, especially Tom Metzger, who had become very interested in it. There's a public TV show, a national TV show called The McLaughlin Report. There's an episode he's on it, and he holds up a copy of Siege. It's kind of wild, from 1993. The second, as I said, a number of the people around Mason were involved in the Church of Satan, and in the church publicized the book, including in their newsletter, Black Flame. Anton LaVey sent James Mason an autographed copy of the Satanic Bible. And the third is that Moynihan used the fanzine network to do this. Some of the zines he was allied with who promoted Siege, like Fifth Path, were available at Tower Records in Manhattan. And I asked some people around at the time who knew about Siege. I was like, how did you know this? Or how did you know these zines? And they're like, oh, I just went to Tower and bought them. It was the big record and magazines, music magazine store at the time when there were such things. Moynihan and Mason even got interviews in a Philly punk zine called No Use for a Fanzine. Despite the fact that the editor was anti-Nazi, he still was interested in them, or interested enough to interview them. It was also carried by a pro-situ book distro called Extreme Books in Portland, Oregon. Once again, the people who were running it weren't neo-Nazis, but they were fascinated by Mason's revolutionary politics. And now there's a question about whether those who bought the book had the same distance from these politics or not. So, I mean, they're selling a book actively promoting neo-Nazi terrorism, whatever their motivation for this is. So a second edition of Siege came out in 2003. It was put online in 2006. But even amongst neo-Nazis, it was a pretty marginal text. I knew about it. There was a debate about it after Lords of Chaos came out, and this Kevin Coogan essay revealing a lot of in a much less detailed form, a lot of information. And there were debates amongst the counterculture about Moynihan and his connections to it. He had, after the book came out, engaged in a long campaign of lies about his background. A lot of journalists repeated this, even some serious scholars, even though at the time he publicly remained an ethno-separatist. And he was, considering how blatant his actions were, he's pretty successful. So, for example, Moynihan played New York City in 2005, and I went back and I found on a listserv I was on a debate amongst a bunch of anarchists of whether people should try to shut the show down or not. And about half of them said that people shouldn't. It was like McCarthyism or guilt by association, and it clearly was not. So Much later on, Mason has kind of retired from the public view after the book was reissued in 2003, and in 2015 came back out of obscurity. Its ideas, which were so outlandish and out of tune in the 80s, now match the current situation. This is when the alt-right is coming into popularity. The book was rediscovered by young neo-Nazi militants who were active on a website and discussion board called Iron March. A bunch of groups came out of it, including the Atomwaffen Division. The people in Iron March published a third edition of Siege, and they made contact directly with James Mason. His ideas spiked after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, because its events appeared to prove Mason right, because his argument, it was pointless for neo-Nazis to even try to hold public events, because if you weren't there, I was there, but this really didn't get communicated so much. A lot of the street fighting that happened before the rally was supposed to start. And when it was supposed to start at noon, the police, who were standing aside like a block away, came in and dispersed everyone. Said it was going to be a riot after it was a riot. And so the rally never was held. And so people were like, oh, Mason's right. They won't even let us hold a rally, much less build political power. Now, a bit ironically, the rally was actually attended by two of Mason's former associates. One was the aforementioned David Duke, who Mason had known, and the other was the party he had co-founded, the National Socialist Movement, that had turned into its opposite and was not advocating terrorism or guerrilla warfare, but it was doing these high-profile rallies and collecting dues and having members. So, why did Siege become so popular in the alt-right era? First, Mason was one of the first neo-Nazis to advocate lone wolf actions. 2, his obsession with Charles Manson, serial killers, and massacres was in tune with online edgelords who are also interested in these extremes. 3, as part of this, it mirrored Mason's connections with cultural movements which intersected with political ones. These cultural movements provided new audiences and approaches that white supremacists wouldn't have had otherwise. 4, there have been many arrests for child porn in these circles and child abuse, and this is something Mason had a predilection for. It's actually an ongoing issue amongst his followers that has caused splits, and there are like an increasing number of arrests amongst the younger siege culture neo-Nazis for child porn and sexually abusing children. 5, Mason had a fetish and praised racist murderers, and today younger people do this online. They beatify them, they call them saints, they make these sometimes quite beautiful iconography based on them and encourage people themselves to become saints. 6, those around Mason were involved with Satanists, and although in his day they were connected to the Church of Satan, today neo-Nazi terrorists are mostly intertwined with the Order of Nine Angles. 7, those around Mason, like Boyd Rice, expressed a really brute misogyny, and this mirrors today's manosphere, including incels who themselves have committed a number of massacres. Some neo-Nazi platforms are so misogynistic they won't allow women to publish on them. 8, Mason thought the political work was hopeless and the whole system had to collapse. Today, this is known as accelerationism. And 9, although I didn't get this into the talk, I talk about it in the book, a number of the people who helped Mason out were either gay or Jewish, and this includes Adam Parfrey, and he was happy to use them for his own ends. And this is more common today than you might think. For example, there was a trans man in the Atomwaffen division who thankfully has now moved out of those politics. Since his rediscovery, younger neo-Nazis make pilgrimages to his apartment or they take pictures with him. So, for example, there's a photo of him with an Atomwaffen member who was just convicted of murdering a gay Jewish man in California. And I've identified about a dozen murders which are tied to Mason's ideas. The perpetrators were either Atomwaffen members or they referred to Siege or Terrorism in their manifestos. And these attacks and arrests are going on constantly. So, for example, in the last 2 months alone, 5 people were stabbed at a mosque in northwest Turkey by an attacker who was on Terrorism. He was in contact with 2 important figures from the Terrorism collective who were just arrested in the US, including for soliciting hate crimes. Another guy was arrested who they were in contact with who was planning on blowing up a nuclear power plant in New Jersey. And 5 members of a related group called the Base were arrested in Europe. This is just in the last 2 months. And so some other things that the Telegram Collective have been tied to is, or helped inspired, was a 2021 mass shooting in an LGBTQ bar in Bratislava, Slovakia. I think this happened in 2022. So what Siege is not a blueprint for a national socialist society, either in the United States or elsewhere. But what it is an internally coherent political justification for murders and mass casualty attacks against Muslims, Jews, immigrants, people of color, LGBTQ plus people, or just random people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. At the same time, it coincides with the popularity of mass shootings. And so we see sort of school shootings blend seamlessly into apolitical mass shootings and then into white supremacist massacres. So on some level, Siege just puts a political gloss on these things. So if you're thinking about committing a school shooting, now that energy can be channeled into it having a political angle. Like after I wrote the book, at some point I was like, I think this is just to some extent a murder cult. And so 40 years after Mason wrote his newsletters, Siege's influence is as strong as ever, and it doesn't appear to be waning anytime soon. So I want to thank everyone for listening. I can't really see what's going on there in the room. I hope Jim's going to do some Q&A. I'm not sure if any of the vendors have the book at the book fair. You can buy it online directly. Sorry, A Moment for Self-Capitalism. You can buy it online from Routledge. And there's a code you can use called NNTCF30, and it'll give you 30% off. You can contact me if you don't remember that, and I'll tell you what it is. So that's the easiest way to buy it. And then I'm happy to have a discussion or answer any questions you have.
Yeah, somebody's got a hand up.
What's your feeling about that?
Jim, you're going to have to repeat it. I can't really hear.
Why don't you come over here and
Come over here.
What's your feeling about heavy metal music as it is today, like Guns N' Roses and Metallica, Marilyn Manson, etc.?
Like what's its tie to white supremacist groups?
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of Nazis in the black metal scene. They're a minority, like in all these things, but they're really there. I can go through some of these things. Guns N' Roses, actually, despite the fact that Slash, the guitarist, is one of his parents is black, has this incredibly racist song from, I think, their most popular album. Tom Metzger promoted it. There are racists in the metal scene. If you've been in it, you know it's a problem. It is, like a lot of the rock genres, becoming more diverse, but it was definitely one of the most white scenes. And I think anytime you have a cultural movement like that, a radical one, you'll find racists. Pantera, if you know Pantera, their singer is a white supremacist. He is constantly, there's these constant videos of him giving sick heils at concerts and saying these wild things, and he always skits out of it. One of the people, so in the book, Michael Moynihan wrote a famous book, as I said, Lords of Chaos, about the black metal scene in Norway. And Varg, who was famous for being in Burzum, which was really the sort of genre-setting black metal act, was a Nazi Satanist. He was jailed for killing the guitarist of his band. And some of the others around him were too. And so that genre, unfortunately, has spun off a sort of subgenre called NSBM, National Socialist Black Metal. And although that term, it's looser than just black metal these days, this is the label that a bunch of racist metal bands glob around, and it's a continuing problem. More of the mainstream bands, I think metal in general is actually getting much better. I mean, it's very multi-generational, and younger people are more liberal. When I was born, the country was 80% white in the US, and now it's 50% white. That makes a lot of these scenes just less white, and that also, frankly, I think makes a lot of them less racist. And we see a continuing problem where organized racists will find vast majority of white cultural scenes, and they'll intentionally move into them and try, because they're like, well, some of these people will be a good recruiting ground. So I think the scene in general has moved away from this. People like Rob Halford of Judas Priest have come out as gay, and I think that really doesn't since they're one of the most famous metal bands, this doesn't bode well for white supremacists to try to move in. So like many genres, it's we call it contested terrain, in which there are kind of everyday racist, garden variety racist, and organized white supremacists in there, and they have to be pushed back against. But they are a minority, and I think in general that the bigger all the metal bands, that scene has actually become a lot less racist than it was in the 80s, for example, at its high point.
So I've got a couple of questions. I guess Metzger and Mason are both still alive?
No, Metzger died actually while I was writing the book. I think he died. I can't remember if he died the day of he died like before election day, I think when Biden was elected. Mason is still alive for sure. I've actually I sent him a copy of the book and exchanged some letters with him. He answered some questions of mine for the book. He lives in Denver. Yeah.
Metzger had this Idaho-based operation, didn't he?
You're confusing him with one of his allies, the Aryan Nations, who are in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is still a center of white supremacist activity. But the three of them kind of were in cahoots. Richard Butler ran the Aryan Nations. Metzger was in Southern California.
Another question I wanted to ask was about QAnon and the QAnon conspiracy phenomenon. Can you say something about that?
Well, there's a lot of cross-pollination with these sort of different kinds of conspiracy theories, different kinds of white supremacists. So, for example, the neo-Nazis aren't always the same as the other white supremacists, but there's some level of collaboration. Sometimes there's the same and sometimes there's different. And then there's cross-pollination between the organized white supremacists and these sort of sometimes call them pure conspiracy theorists, because a lot of that stuff is just based on anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And so if you sort of go down that part of the thought process to its bottom, you will generally move into anti-Semitic kinds of white supremacist movements. And so you see a lot of back and forth. Sometimes the QAnon stuff, because it's so big and popular, becomes a funnel in which certain people, you'll constantly see these stories about important QAnon influencers suddenly putting up Nazi or pro-Nazi documentaries. So there is a lot of back and forth. The QAnon stuff tends to be a little more politically mild, but you'll find things like January 6th, where there was a lot of, a fair amount of QAnon influence, and there were several dozen ideological white supremacists involved. So it all becomes part of a larger milieu. You might think of it as anarchists or communists or whatever, a relationship with a large liberal grassroots movement, right? Like there'll be anarchists in that movement, although they will be like on an edge of it or a side of it, but have a relationship, have intellectual and conceptual political relationships, or share these ideas with the larger movement. Jim, do you want to tell your Adam Parfrey story?
Well, I'm not sure what Adam Parfrey story I have. Remind me. I mean, I certainly knew Adam Parfrey when he was in New York. Yeah, he tried to have a couple of joint projects together that I never was interested in pursuing. But what story are you thinking about?
I think you told me once he came over to the warehouse with a friend of his who was a fascist.
Oh, that was Bob Black.
Oh, that was Bob
yeah, it was
Black.
Bob Black. No, it wasn't Parfrey. It was Bob Black, and I think he brought a guy who was the head of the American Nazi Party. He didn't introduce him that way. I didn't know who this guy was, but Bob Black, I think, got a big thrill out of that.
Mm-hmm. There was this sort of.
Here's another question.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about your research process and like the archives that you found helpful? I'm particularly interested in you mentioned the message boards and sort of like stuff that wasn't material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That's an interesting thing. So, I'm a Gen Xer, so I was raised and trained with dealing with paper archives. Like I was in grad school at the time of the paper digital transition. So most of the material I found was in an archive in Lawrence, Kansas, called the Laird Wilcox Collection. he was this sort of anti-extremist guy who thought the radical left and radical right were equal or something. But they did create this massive collection of materials. And James Mason had sold 60 boxes of his correspondence, paper correspondence to them. And Mason had been like an inveterate collector of this stuff. He was an insider into the neo-Nazi movement. So he wrote letters to everybody, all these famous figures. He was friends, like William Pierce was his mentor. And he didn't just save their letters, he saved carbon copies of his outgoing letters. So it was this just massive amount of material, which I spent a week there, and I ended up pretty quickly just taking pictures of these letters and then spending years sorting through them. It took me 5 years to write the book, and then another year dealing with the press. I supplemented that with visits to other paper archives, like in Atlanta, the Center for Democratic Renewal. There was limited secondary texts on this. They actually made it worse because a lot of them were filled with garbage information. So even when I read the right stuff, I didn't know what was right or wrong, and I had to confirm everything. There was a lot of the digital stuff was online, and it was actually quite difficult because the videos would pop up and down because they'd be taken down. I had to figure out how to, probably the URLs I have in the book, a lot of them aren't accessible anymore. Obviously, a lot of stuff on archive.org. The message boards, I wanted to do a whole section on the more contemporary stuff. I mostly relied on secondary text for that. The book's like 450 pages. This was the contemporary stuff was actually the stuff I most relied on secondary text, because a lot of people now spend a lot of time on the digital stuff, and they've produced a lot of research. So there's so much writing about the far right in a way that didn't happen between, say, the late 90s and like 2015. It was really, there were very few people watching it. So they're producing very little writing about it. So much is produced now that really, I mean, it was sufficient for my purposes to read the secondary work, a lot of mostly reports and articles that people had written. But a lot of that in turn was based on either they were infiltrating these groups. Now this stuff is largely Telegram groups, or there have been big leaks from the discussion board. So Iron March, someone leaked the entire thing and all the discussions. So it's searchable, and you can go read through all of them, read these things as these first wave of young neo-Nazi terrorist groups are forming, read the discussions they're having, and find out exactly when they start introducing James Mason. So for this book, it was largely paper. It was a sort of interesting thing that I wrote it because I was interested in both the neo-Nazis and the cultural stuff, and maybe other people would only be interested in one or the other. And now a lot of the stuff has moved to digital. So people either infiltrate online, create a sock puppet, and infiltrate what are now largely Telegram groups, or they rely on these big leaks that have appeared.
I have a question. 3 questions. One, I'm just curious about you, if you want to share about yourself, but also 2 and 3, maybe 4 questions. I'm curious about if these Nazis have any religion or spirituality, and if that can be traced to hippies of now, and if what the line is from hippie to Nazi, and how to stop that.
Ooh.
And how to stop Nazis in general.
Do we have 2 minutes? Are we going to get cut off? Is there another presentation of 3?
No problem. Yeah, let her roll.
Let her roll. Okay. Me. I don't. I formed I was in the punk scene. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. It was where Larry Flint was shot. We had Klan rallies on our courthouse regularly. The president of the John Birch Society was our congressional rep, so it was a very conservative area. And I was in the Atlanta. We were in a small town outside of Atlanta. Could go there at the time. It was one of the bases, one of the main centers of the Nazi skinhead thing. There were probably a half dozen or a dozen neo-Nazi groups there. And I ended up forming what would now be called an anti-fascist group there to sort of push back against them. It wasn't an ARA group, but it was similar. Spirituality is very important to white supremacists. Some of them are Christian. Christian identity is an explicitly racist and anti-Semitic version of Christianity. A lot of them belong to. It's not so popular now. It's sort of coming back around the edges. But a lot of them are Christian, and with this revival of the Christian right, with the smashing of Roe versus Wade. This has become more influential again. A lot of them are pagans or heathens in particular, a form of Northern European paganism. All right, not all heathens are fascists, but maybe more than a lot of other sort of religious elements are. It's a big problem amongst heathens, other pagans, not so much. And so, for example, Michael Moynihan in the book becomes a heathen, and some of the other characters in this book are heathens. There were heathens at Charlottesville. This is a common thing you'll find. Satanists. There are. I just gave a talk in an occult bookstore about Nazi Satanism. Most Satanists aren't Nazis. Most Nazis aren't Satanists. Most Nazis hate Satanists, but some of them are Nazi Satanists. They're very influential in this wave of groups now, these terrorist groups. The Order of Nine Angles is the form that is. But the Church of Satan also helped facilitate the really production and really distribution of Siege. So Satanism is a real thing that's there. And just like it's my philosophy, or some of these guys are also Gnostics, so this ties into a bit of your hippie question. A lot of Mason feels very much like the 60s in many ways, like and when the NSWPP splinters and the groups all argue with each other, it really is like when it's at the same time and very similar to when all these like Trotskyist and other Marxist-Leninist groups come out of the 60s when the SDS splits up and they're all feuding with each other over ideology and personality clashes. And some of this is he pulls off of Charles Manson, and Manson is a spiritual guy. He's a Gnostic. And so there's a kind of Gnosticism that works its way into the characters in the book, into James Mason, and even people like Boyd Rice get interested in Gnosticism. The Abraxas Foundation, Abraxas is a Gnostic deity. And so this drives some of this. I also get interested in Alfred Rosenberg, who was a high propagandist in the original German Nazi Party, who had a kind of Gnostic philosophy. So you'll find, so it's my sort of impression over the years that because there's not a real firm like intellectual basis for white supremacy, like in the old days, like they could use race science, but this stuff has been completely discredited, right? And so they turn to, when they want a deeper intellectual basis for their politics, a lot of them turn to religion to do that. If nothing else, it gives them something to think about. Like, I'm not even sure it's how much it structures their activism, but if you want to explore some kind of deeper thing to your politics, a lot of them turn to a religious base to them. Hippies, are you talking about like the crunchy, like yoga mom to QAnon pipeline? What do you mean for the last one today?
It may be difficult to describe, but there's certain hippies that are heavily into certain kinds of spirituality. Many of them are following what's that guy, RFK Jr.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean like real hippies from the 60s and 70s, or you mean like younger hippie-ish people?
I mean the hippies. I think we're done.
We're done.
But,
Sorry, guys.
All right. You can
Maybe I'll
contact
email
me if you need me to answer that question. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Spencer.
Thank you.
Whoa, thank you, Spencer, for all your work, all your research, everything. We really deep gratitude. Sorry, I lost my voice.
It's all good. It's all good.
I couldn't talk tomorrow.
Thank you for all your work on the book fair over the years. I know it's a huge job to organize.
Thank you, my love. Thank you.
I think bigger than ever this year, I think.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you. Hey, Tongo!
Hey, yo.
Oh, good. You here again.
I'm here again, man. Much love, solidarity.
I know that you're a father now.
Yeah, the baby actually in the back
The
seat right
baby,
there.
beautiful.
Baby right there. I'm sorry. I'm in Chicago. Got kind of stuck, and so I
No, no
gotta go here.
problem, Tongo. Congratulations for your beautiful baby.
Thank you very much. So we is it go time? I should begin.
Black, can you start? Yeah, go.
All right, sorry. Capitalists eat until the world is blurry to them. These streets are made of saliva. There's some people made of saliva too. They usually got on uniforms. While a crazy man spins round and round trying to make a record out of this mass production jungle, maybe I'll join him. Count cash and cry. These streets are made of saliva, and white sheets are worn by a building in which kids are supposed to learn how to read well. White sheets on the highway too. Another mirror needs their head on the pike. One down is just one down. But you tell all this to the masses and your teacher will pipeline you. They told me I was jewelry. They told me this is jungle. Well, maybe not jungle, more like 50 machine guns planted in the ground. It's raining faces again in California. What does it say about heaven? What does it say about the people you killed? Waiting lines got so exhausted, a million minds dropped all these faces at once. If the fascists could read the lips of a giant talking in his sleep, we might as well make our demands in prison letters. Today was born the most important trigger finger in the world. Today I've begun to count down the pages between now and a pile of books by Tunnel. Chicago is going to walk out of Chicago one day. Babies that drag street signs like old toys. Today the most important letter left prison. Babies laugh at flags like faces that have disappeared. Maybe I'll join them. But for now, these streets are made of saliva, and we raise half-full glasses to the basements that meant nothing. And the working poor who live there, we get shot. We get white sheets on California, where the kitchen table likes to talk as much as the walls, and romance on the porch consists of hard residing. I mean, in this picture, characters talk, spit, and know that they're hard to kill. The kitchen table knows this. The porch is almost convinced that one down is just one down. This town is coming to town. A circus watching itself. Half distracted, half suicidal, thrilled children dressed as cops. Thrilled children preaching and policing and intaking and hiring and snatching your money. This town's coming to town with tough trademarks to follow. Today, I watch capitalism walk on water and people play dead so that they could be part of a miracle. Guided by teeth goes this country. There's a cow's mouth on the flag. A peculiar notepad holds street life dear, but the writer's not here. He's somewhere talking to tombstones about the good old days, or splashing reborn water on his latest face, or wondering how's old gun doing in the afterlife, wondering how much death trap is in those gas station hours. It got to be $1 million a day on this concrete island. New engine in the moon, why it never goes down. I mean, 72 straight hours of night, at least according to everyone's posture around here. 8:30 in the morning is really 30 minutes of closing. The city shuts down for a sleepy rat race. Elevator shoe shuffle to the nearest heaven. Laugh with rats the whole way up. There's scabs everywhere. In puddles of city, in concentrated schools and TV lit warm rooms, the light reveals military fatigue when it hits just right on the ties that are wrapped around the necks of lazy white guys. Empire is too easy, baby. Chant at the walls off some if you feel like it. Best way for a target to move is shooting back. Running for a tree line made of freeways. Wisdom says against a war machine on Tuesday, you stand no chance, but may we be the last poor people to play it safe. Cow's mouth on the flag. A politician raises his hand and the crowd shows their teeth. An oligarch raises his hand, little kids are not safe outside. We all hide, depressed, and comrades and function. 15 minutes of closing, and the city has survived another rebellion. We just paying dues by trash fires, not just anybody can set. And don't you love how deadly things whisper in the moment and people kill like feathers fall while everybody's screaming inside? The writer knows that death is not a matter of dignity, rather humor. In a house that smells like roach races, nuclear percentages on torn stoves, here life never was. Just lazy matches and manic inhumanity, hands rushing away from life towards stoves. What we doing here? Surviving for no reason in particular, because nobody gone far today. Nobody go far tomorrow. Trust me, hell and heaven cannot count. Strange gardens where secondhand clothes play, and concrete wishes to be human so that it could be accountable. Where they find you drenched, and drains wish to be human so that they could be worthy arms for you to die in. Hey, greet them all, grandson. Prepare for the day when every child is common. Don't say we ghosts didn't write you a poem. Don't say we didn't dig your life. Remember the shotgun by the coat rack that everybody in the house knows how to use. Remember the tightrope made of needles for walking in between driveways and man-made best friends. Go ahead, grandson, tune the street again. Never mind, this country kills musicians first. Broken neck night, scarred neck life. If these walls could write lyrics, they say, what's your angle, angel eyes? 30 to 50 rounds past by on the street with no daughters. The street has no sons. Just young prisoners of war in a racist city that means to make capital. And we know so much. We know it all. We were stood against walls. Who's on the third cross around here? Cow's mouth, salivating over the street. And that is the story of why we aim at teeth. You know, first, I should have apologized to the souls of the house because I'm wearing the cheekbones of the mask only. Like a pill bottle whose name is yours, name tagged on the side of a factory of wrists. I mean, teeth of the mask now. Back of the head of the mask now. A new phase of anti-anthropomorphism fending for real faces. Stuck in one of those cultures that believes I chose this family. I'm not creative. Just the silliest of the revolutionaries. My blood drying on my only jacket. The police state psychic middleman evangelizing for the creation of an unmasses, unmedgar, blood of a lamb less racialized, an awesome prison sentence. Right angle made between a point on a Louisiana plantation and a 5-year-old's rubber ball. 3 feet high and falling like a deportee plane to complete my interpretation of garden variety genocide. I'm small talk about loving your enemies a little more realistically. About paper tigers and also gold. I need my left hand back. Broke my neck on a piano key. Found paradise in a fist fight. Maybe I should check into the Cuba line. Watching the universe last metronome. Some call black Jacobins. Just wait. These religions will start resigning in a decade or two. Some colorfully. Some transactionally. In a cotton gothic society, class betrayal gone glasses. I mean, ironically, my window started fogging over too as I was trying to figure out which Haiti would get me through the winter, which poem houses souls, which socialist breakthroughs. Breakthroughs like taking 10 steps back and finally trying stillness, like introducing Gabriel Prosser to Thelonious Monk. I mean, I remember childhood, remember the word childhood being a beginning. Scribbling on an amazing grace, I rented this body from some circumference of slavery. Remember being kicked out the Midwest. Strange Fruit Theater, lithium and circuses, like-minded stomachs, the ruling class blessing their blank text with levy foam, with opioid tea, $10 dollar bills yelling to each other, pocket to pocket, cello stands in the precinct for a company, counter-revolutionaries. My mother raised me with a simple pain. A poet loses his mind. Like the room has weather, or first girlfriend gravity. Difference between me and you, the madness wants me forever. A pair of apartments defining both my family and political composure. Books behind my back, bail money paved into the streets playing euphoria, euphoria cliche. Bracelets for the medicine's recoil, sharing a dirty deli sandwich with my friends. Black Jacobin's underground topography of a grandmother's hands. Psychology of the mask now. Teeth of the mask again. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative. All over the United States, there are toddlers in the rock. I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket and why blood agreements mean a lot and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history and take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm. Ricochet sewers near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti. In the kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part, no cops in part. My body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets, pray over blankets made from the old bullets. Pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration. The waistband before the next protest post. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your death for last. You're a widow, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only raining one thing. Non-white cops. And prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk flowing on an oil spill. A neighborhood making a lot of fuss over its demise. A new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder. The figment of village. A new news to a new white preacher. All in an abstract painting of a president. Bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tanted screeches of military boats and election Tuesday cars. A cold-blooded study in leg irons proof that some white people have actually found the nooses there. Sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque peach plastic and boat action audiences. The Medgar Evers second is definitely my favorite law of science. Found news clippings of primitive Methodists, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even wider white spectrums. Artists bleeding in the challenge of watching civilians think. Terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm going to go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads into arrows myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest, modern fans of war, with their T-shirt poems and T-shirt guilt. And me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus, I have no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. Though apparently too much of San Francisco was not there in the first place. I mean, this dream requires more condemned Africans, or put another way, state violence rises down, or still life is just getting warmed up, or army life is looking for a new church and ignored all other suggestions, or folktale writers have not made up their minds as to who is going to be their friends. This is the worst downtown yet, and I've borrowed a cigarette everywhere. I've taken many a walk to the back of a bus that led on out the back of a storyteller's prison sentence, then on out the back of slave scars, but this is my comeback phase. I left my watch on the public bathroom sink and took the toilet with me. Threw it at the first bus I saw, eating single mothers half a lot. It flew through the bus line numbered and on out the front of the White House. Hopefully you find comfort downtown, but if not, we brought you enough cigarette filters to make a decent winter coat. A special species of handshake lets all know who's king and what's the lifespan of uniform cloth. This coffin needs to quit acting like those are birds singing. Rusty nails have no wings, have no voice other than that of a white world down. Their book pages in the gas pump. Catchy, isn't it? The way 3 nooses is the rule, or the way potato sack masks go so well with radio codes, or the way condemned Africans fought their way back to the ocean, only to find waves made of 1920s burnt up piano parts, European backdoor deals, and red flowers for widows who spent all day in the sun mumbling in San Francisco. Red flowers, well, what's the color of a doctor visit? There are book titles in the streets. Book titles. Like Hero, You'd Make a Better Zero, or Hey Fur Coat Lady, the President is Dead, or Pay Me Back in Children, or They Hung Up Their Bodies in Their Own Museums, and other book titles pulled from a drum solo. Run Here, Hero, Lie at the Hiding Place, All the Bullets in 10 Precincts Know Where to Go. There's no heaven nor any other good idea in the sky. Politics means that people did it and people do it. Understand that when in San Francisco and other places that was never really there. I bet this ocean thinks it's an ocean, but it's not. It's just 60 Mission Street. All know who's king. King of thin things, you know, like America, I'm proud to deserve to die. I'm going to eat my dinner extra slow tonight in this police state candidate, especially you all call a neighborhood. Man, no set of manners goes unpunished. Never mind a murderer's insomnia, or the tea kettle preparing everyone for police sirens, a tour guide through your robbery I also am, cigarette saying, look what I did about your silence, ransom water and box spring gold, this decade is only for accent grooming, I guess. Ransom water and box spring gold, the corner store must die. War games, I guess, all these tongues rum is junk. The start of mass destruction begins and ends in restaurant bathrooms that some people use and other people clean. Hey, man, you telling me it's a rag in the sky? Yeah, waiting for you, yeah. We've written this thing. We set a stage. We should have fit in warehouse jobs for coming, you know, but more hallway and corridor of walk into our lives. Now the whistling is less playful and the barbed wire overcrowded too. My dear, if it is not a city, it is a prison. If it has a prison, it is a prison, not a city. When a courtyard talks on behalf of military issue, all walks take place outside of the body. Dear life to your left, the medieval painting to your right. None of this really makes an impression. Crop people living in thin air, you have 5 minutes to learn how to see through this breeze. When a mask goes sideways, barbed wire becomes a floor, barbed wire becomes a roof, 40 feet into the sky becomes out of bounds. When a mask breaks a half mind, which way the eyes go? You know they killed the world for the sake of giving everyone the same backstory. We're watching Gary, Indiana fight itself into the sky. Oh, pennies for wind, for that wind fund you give before the hood goes up and over your headache. Pennies that stick together, mocking all aspirations. I mean, Stuck Together Pennies was the first newspaper I ever read, along with the storefront dwelling army that always lets us down, where the Holy Spirit favors the back room, souls in a situation that offer 100 ways to remain a loser, souls watching the clock hoping their eyes don't lie to sad people. What were we talking about again? The narrator asked the graveyard, at 10 minutes flat, said the graveyard, the funeral only took 10 minutes. They never tell that to anyone again. You just gonna pin the 90s on me, all 30 years of them? Then why should I know the difference between sleep and satire? The pyramid of corner stores fell on our heads. We died right away. That building wants to climb up and jump off another building. These are downtown decisions. Somewhere on this planet, it's August 7th, and we running down the rust thinking one more needs to come with me. What evaporated on Earth so that we could be sent back down? You know, these little societies, they wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offing me. A nation of breadwinners to hold me back. Like it's a Brinks. I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence. Turned away from a podium into the reeds like God is a dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know, they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you in your broken neck from their foolish euphoria. From the loyalty up to their great superstition, loyalty up to their agrarian reform. I mean, I returned to my mother completely disrespected. For peeling the heat off of purgatory, they kill poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this final industrial complex, the bloodlines picked over, picked through, a sporting spiritual death of your devil at least half made. Police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in America, people. Tyranny against your chump change. You attempt to be mocked even with a gun in your car. A cubit of needlework spell tuned for the proletariat, the relapse ministry. Talented people curled up in the fetal position next to a diamond dime. Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism and a bouquet of surveillance cameras in the poverty of God. New blue eyes, courses of water. A newly potted presidency. One big shiny coin if you ask animated capitalism. Another non-literal voice. Killing his wife freedom. The deification of hyphens. Medicine bread and picture shows. Great protesters in L.A. Guests of our ink. Drop kicking roses in the graveyard. DC mink like a stone 20 and a half. The pen advances despite CIA guides posts. Despite non-African past and futures. A metaphorical but not surreal day in the horn-ridden life. Horn player, improvising king. Like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself, a real hand sweeps the land of racism. Now return to the ground. Now make progress with the gun. On our mother and manual, they put on music that evening. A swinging type body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills. For your body language, some applause by past stomach lining, neither a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. Here to sit you down was Lady Day. Lady Day leading you to surrender their souls to Africa too soon. Holly thought floating in the cup of water, she saved me. Accessing my stomach, accessing the love of the American lynched. Coast leaves with an avalanche to the wrist. Our mother Emmanuel, avalanche to the sharp keys, pain. That deal you make with pain. Our piano makes sense for them. Laying hands on the world gradually, addressing the bending necks on the streets of the north. Travelers sailing in pain, repeating pain in the north. 10 trigger fingers on that piano if harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direction offered her Lady Day. Leaning on trees again, recruiting the countryside itself. Saying lay your plan out on this lightning. Make your poems a corner pocket of men. I greeted the blues itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet. Killing without killing. Never mind this love. Painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. The crows passing. Good and dead by the afternoon. All right, much love, y'all. About to sign on. Respect. I can't hear y'all, but man, again, man, much love.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Tongo. Thank you again. Beautiful, incredible. I lost my voice, sorry.
Oh, it's all good. Always all good, you know. Always with y'all, man.
Oh, love you.
Love y'all, man.
Love you. Thank you, Tongo.
Right on, right on. I appreciate y'all, man.
Yeah.
Next time, you know where to find me.
Yeah, my love. Thank you so
right.
much.
All right, y'all.
Good night.
All right, peace.
Peace. Thank you, my friend. Super.
Oh.
Now we still have one more point.
Oh, but now
Hello. Oh.
Hello, comrade.
Yay.
Can you hear us well?
Huh?
Can you hear us well?
Of course, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
So good to be together with you again.
Yes. We're
I'd like to say that these two people is the one that did it together with us. The Anarchist Bookfair poster this year. They are amazing artists, architects, poets, activists, anarchists. Just thank you, my lover, to be here with us. And I cannot wait to hear your poem and your film.
Yes, such an honor and pleasure to be amongst all of you. Yeah, thank you for everything. We made the poster with you, and that's why it turned out to be amazing. That's the anarchist way, always making something collectively with like beautiful, back and forth. And we're so just proud, and we're, of course, like, it's bittersweet because we wish we were there. We were there last year, but we're there in spirit, and we love you all. And thank you, everyone who's put all their hard labor and all their spirit and soul into putting this together. It's really just incredible. We're just humbled. We don't have enough words. We have a poem here that's it's called "Fuck the State," but fuck written as FAQ. But in our case, it's not frequent asked questions, it's frequent anarchist questions. I guess we'll start. Of course, we want to send our love to Tongo and all the other comrades who've been before us throughout the day. Tongo, we love you. You're always an inspiration, true revolutionary. We're just always really moved to hear your voice and your words and your soul. We'll do our best to do the same thing. Okay, so we'll start. Okay, let us find the text. Okay, here we go. So, what triggers a revolution? Why is revolution both pre-revolution and post-revolution, both during revolution and past revolution? How fast does now become history? Who is tired and of what? How do we occupy a factory that produces electricity? Where are the anarchist scientists? What language do we speak? What is the language of thought?
What is the function of architecture and urban planning and revolution and the abolition of gender? How is the army and its industry made obsolete? How can the global banking system be rendered useless? What kind of violence against the state and capital would bring collective healing? What content and structure do anarchist poetics appear as? What is learned from BIPOC, queer, trans, and feminist comrades? Why is anarchy panmetic?
How do we materially and financially produce mutual aid anarchist constitutions that function solely for the protection and well-being of the most oppressed people? What is the language of solidarity? What are the potentialities and pessimisms of internet? How can the liberal influence of identity politics be annihilated? Why is it utopia bourgeois? What are the historical paradigms of isonomia, autogestion, and horizontal structure of governance? How do we oppose and successfully abolish and fight the police on a daily basis? How do we raise children? How do we support the revolutionary Palestinian cause and any cause, international cause against the state? What makes anarchist vengeance so beautiful? Who is an activist, and why is activism colonial language? What are the valences of collective joy in art? What kind of healthy food do we want to eat and produce? How do we dance with nature? How do we imagine what we dream? What makes you happy, comrade? What is ethical? What makes religion creative and destructive? What do you question, comrade? What do you remember, comrade? What are we willing to do in regards to artificial intelligence? What turns you on, comrade? Do you sing? What do you see every day? Which factories produce useless commodities? What is the ontology of friendship? What stresses you out, comrade? Is God dead? A dude? A dad? A dud? A deed? Is capitalism in decline or renaissance? What was the Marxist project, and what has Marxism become today?
What is the role of social media in the process of social revolution, and what do we replace social media with? What kind of situations and conditions do we create that will help people overcome their addictions to smartphones? How do we combat modern addictions such as video games, porn, hard drugs, and automation? Why is automation an epiphenomenon and not a liberator for the working class? Why is music revolutionary? What lasts? What is our autonomy concerning the production of food? What kind of agriculture do we need? What historical catalyst and international solidarity movement would lead to abolishing the nation state? What are the specific paradigms and groups of white supremacy that hold cultural and economic power? What organization represents the proletariat today? What are the functions of the party today? What is a healthy, concrete embodiment of struggle? Who is ready for revolution? Who sacrifices and what?
Do we need leaders? And if yes, what kind? Is the state expanding in 2024 on a global and regional scale? Is it world system, planetary dependency, capitalist initiative? What is the function of weather? What is the function of climate science? Is dialectics an idealization of contradiction? That is, does capital need dialectics to sustain itself? What philosophical principles, eschatology, apocalyptic, messianic texts are disguised as academia? Why can't academics be trusted? What is the degree of material and psychosomatic joy in our epoch? Is there a globalized moral evolution? What is progress? Comrade, do you follow hope or hubris? What is the function of intellectual labor in 2024? And what is the relationship of the Western university within the production of capital and the capitalist imaginary and the political influence of the student body? Why sometimes or often doesn't the majority work to ameliorate its conditions and its preservation? What is your phobia, comrade? What is your trauma, comrade? How can we help you, comrade? How can we help you? How do we recognize that an object and subject is good? Are you lonely, comrade? How can we help you, dear comrade? What makes you smile and laugh, comrade? What haven't anarchists done yet? What are the questions that you can't find answers to? How do you imagine Earth will look like 50, 300, or 7,000 years from now? How do we combat scarcity? Comrade, have you ever built anything with your hands? What do you enjoy to read? What difficulty is worth engaging and fighting for? What are some successful strategies against surveillance? Who strikes first? Comrade, do you masturbate for analgesic reasons? Are your shoes comfortable? What do we need to do today, this very moment that we are reciting this text? Who do you consider your people? Have you fought for them or against them? What affect, labor, and empathy do we practice? What is the ontology of equality? Is gender a social construct or a religious one? Is it a real abstraction?
What is capital's new forms? What is the historical relationship between religion and theory? What is the historical influence of gender and analytical thinking in science? What are the ideologistics of struggle? When do we defend and when do we attack? How do we rehearse insurrection? What are we waiting for? What is a cause? Is there enough time? Work for capital or potentially die and be imprisoned for insurrection? Is it revolutionary to bear children in our times? Is it unglobalization or deglobalization?
Why is Russia deleveraging but the banks aren't? What would a class analysis of AI entail? Why hasn't there ever been a crisis in the cosmetic industry? What theory saves you? Inundation or information? Evidence or proof? What theory destroys you? What constitutes property today? Can spirituality be anti-capitalist and revolutionary? What are those forms? Are all questions open? What is our nature? What is an anarchist algorithm? Which factories of commodities and which commodities need to become extinct? Can a Twinkie factory be reappropriated into another anarchist factory? What would an anarchist factory look like and function? In an epoch of AI speed, laser speed weapons, digital money speed, fast genocide, hypercomputer speed economy, and decision making, do we have time for analysis, reflection, and discourse? Why is AI art and the capitalist imaginary so kitsch abject, pop lazy, logostenotic, thanato-western, ego-turbo, technomaniac, anti-sublime, commodity gonic, anti-pax sexual, clone-phobic, psycho-cybervore, keyboard horny, ghost lost, anti-negentropic, doomago kenophobic, cata-historical, museumist, parthenolilist, mytholess, fascisto-normalizing, chromocancerous, pseudo-perfect, techno-cynical, bliss-tranquilizing, troll-heroic, NOE-imaginative, bourgeois impotent, cowardice-philic, uber-fetish, endotraumatic, apersutopio, phallo-idealized, photo-academia anemic, meta-privileged, now genocidal, money-gendered, total nightmarish, holon gentrifying, harsh retinal, anti-tender, theo-Hollywoodist, geo-dead, animophagy monopolizing, tart art, fastware, supra-urban, ur-value fashion, ergo necropoetic, meme media, full-friendly, pain rainbow natural, copy and paste, wild web, Lord Thorn aesthetical, ego pastiche mabelist, self-secret, self-servant, secret services, fat fatalist, geist alarmist, status quo, yes doozy hegemonic, docu-toxic, cis CEO robot workaholic, meta-surveillance, upcycle, uncrit economy, psycho-monopoly, electro-white supremacist, shit hits the fan, Anglo-rhythmic, caco-conceptual, acts the dispossessed experimental, phobic, cosmo-patriarchal carceral, sex subjective, glossy, prolicidal, gun says lard viral, glue ugly, ideocolonialist, purloin dialectic, purloin boredom trained, etho abyss, klepto historical, copyright right wing, math flabby, and futurist. What is war today? What is a revolutionary form of treatment and acknowledgement of our neighbors and interpersonal relationships with other cultures and languages? What is alienation today?
How do we fix the problem of passive consuming and commodification of revolutionary ideas? What are the concrete decolonial strategies of rematriation of land to indigenous peoples? How do we destroy cryptocurrency? In what social relations does love blossom and unite? What answers need to be abolished? What doesn't die? How do we find each other? Do you want to be found? What is the work of becoming worthy of trust? Are you imagining the abolition of all colonial maps? How can roads be unwound in recognition that not all things, spaces, cultures are meant to be known to everyone?
Thank you. Woo!
Fotógrafo, jornalista, por favor, atrás da linha aqui, ó.
Já pode o linha!
Dessem mais importância pra gente do que dão importância para esses ratos de paletó que estão lá dentro, que são verdadeiros mentirosos, que não estão lá dentro pela proteção das nossas florestas e do meio ambiente, que estão lá, na verdade, por benefício próprio.
Isso, mano.
E fere ao nosso direito, fere a nossa Constituição. Nós, como um direito originário de ter nossas terras, né? E que, na verdade, hoje nós assim, ocupamos essa terra que é do governo federal, né? Não é nossa, né?
Eu vejo que quem mais preserva, né, as florestas são vocês, que estão aqui dentro, né? E só utilizam aquilo que realmente precisa, né? Não desmatam. Vocês são os verdadeiros protetores da floresta. Só para ter uma ideia, né? Se a gente olhar aqui a imagem, do lado de cá do rio, a gente tem aqui as terras do dia. Do outro lado, você vai ter campo, florestas, né, com gado já, né? Aqui não, aqui as coisas estão acontecendo, a história, né, a história viva. A gente vai lutar, continuar lutando para que esse PL 490 ele não seja aprovado.
E a gente realmente assim, hoje sofre, né, com essa PL que desde 2007 que transitando, que fere os direitos da população, né? E hoje com isso a gente tipo assim fica muito assustado, com muito medo, né? Porque como eu falei atrás, já fomos dizimados, né? Várias etnias, né?
Então o PL ele acaba que ele é um retrocesso, né, para quem mora aqui e aquilo que o cacique colocou, né? Deixa com medo, né? Fica com medo porque não sabe o que vai acontecer amanhã.
dessas leis, né, que vêm, né, impactando a demarcação de terras indígenas, né, no Brasil, no Acre, né. E hoje a gente, tipo assim, sofre, porque essa terra do governo federal sempre eles nos ameaçam, né.
Estamos aquí en el COP para dar a conocer al mundo, para nuestras familias, para que nos puedan ayudar y beneficiar todo lo que necesitamos, porque nosotros somos los guardianes de nuestro territorio, que es de 3 millones de hectáreas. Y estamos bien preocupados. Aquí nuestro gobierno del Ecuador nos está presionando para sacar el crudo en nuestro territorio. ¿Y qué nos garantiza el gobierno para la niñez orani? Y nos preocupa que el gobierno ecuatoriano venga a plantear aquí en el COP sobre la conservación, pero todo es al revés. Quiere sacar el crudo en nuestro territorio. Por eso hemos venido para dar la voz, que escuchen, y también están escuchando allá en nuestro territorio. Están esperando nuestra noticia, una buena noticia para poder trabajar como en proyectos alternativos para sustentar a nuestras familias. Y lo importante es nuestro territorio, la defensa territorial.
Estamos aqui nessa luta, né? Mais uma vez, batendo de frente com esse governo aí, esse desgoverno, né? Que a todo momento tenta criar estratégias de dizimar as populações originárias. Estou aqui com o meu curumim, né? Porque a única esperança que eu tenho é neles. Essa luta hoje é para que eles compreendam a importância, né? Da gente ter nossos territórios demarcados, a nossa floresta no lugar, os nossos rios, meio ambiente, né? Que é o que nos proporciona a vida, né? Não tem vida sem terra e não tem vida sem demarcação. Então, é uma luta que vem se propagando há mais de 521 anos, mas um índio na guerra ele não cansa. A gente está aqui, né, para não só mostrar, mas independente o que tiver de fazer, a gente vai fazer para estar afirmando que o índio na guerra ele não cansa. Por mais que eles tentem anular nossa existência, por mais que eles tentem silenciar nossa voz, por mais que eles tentem matar nossos corpos e acabar com a nossa natureza, a gente está aqui, a gente vai continuar resistindo por mais 521 anos se for necessário, que a futura geração está vindo aí e eles vão ter consciência de que a luta pela mãe natureza é a mãe de todas as lutas.
I am here from the Amazon to denounce the exploration that is being done to our lands by big companies.
Nós somos os verdadeiros guardiões da floresta amazônica. Nós estamos lutando, temos lutado todos os dias para protegê-la, mesmo que para isso nós tenhamos que dar a nossa vida. E nós vamos continuar lutando. Nós fazemos isso não somente por nós fazemos isso por vocês também. Nós estamos lutando uma luta diferente para proteger a Amazônia contra a exploração predatória que todos os dias bate na porta dos nossos territórios. Nós precisamos do apoio de vocês. Nós precisamos estar juntos para defender o pulmão do mundo, que é a Amazônia. Uma das verdadeiras soluções para a crise climática é devolver os territórios sagrados do nosso povo. Demarcação já! Demarcação já! Demarcação já!
Mais ou menos assim. Isso não está tendo, né, esses conteúdos que disponibiliza realmente para enriquecer mais o conhecimento sobre os povos nativos, né? Então hoje a gente atende a demanda, né, pela saúde da humanidade, pela cura da humanidade, pela vida da humanidade. A gente hoje, né, trabalha em cima disso para a gente poder realmente, né, ajudar as famílias que precisam.
Chocarroa, chocarroa toda.